Okay. So, Brandon, where are you? Say hi to everybody. Oh, there you go.
There. Hi.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm okay. How are you, Dave?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, I think I might try to grow the scruff. I'm debating right now.
Yeah,
So,
I'd been keeping mine in check, and then the weather's cooling down, so I figured
yeah,
I'd give the beard a try.
yeah, it looks good. It looks good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're rocking it. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. This class is a little different from some of the other ones. This class is dedicated primarily to action storyboarding.
Okay.
So I've been trying to I had Brad Rader on. I don't know if you know Brad or not, but he was a
Oh yeah,
story
I know
artist.
Brad. Yeah, talk about having a beard. Yeah.
Yes, everybody has beards. That's right. It's right. We have a theme going. So he was on actually last week. He was talking because I've been kind of hitting different types of action, and to a certain degree, just to kind of talk about the variations and differences in approach, and the things that are things that are similar and things that are different. And I thought you'd be perfect because you kind of walked like Brad actually had some samples. He did a he we talked primarily about Batman last week, but we did talk about a little bit. He had Stripperella and he showed a Stripperella board. But you're working in you came from Transformers, so you're working in CG,
Hmm.
and then you're working on Harley Quinn. Now you're directing Harley Quinn, and which is an action comedy. And I think that it's interesting to me because like I love Harley. I've devoured all those 2 seasons. I didn't think it was one of those shows where I wasn't sure if I was going to love it or hate it. And it ended up being like it's one of my favorites. I love that show.
I'll tell you, once I read the first script, I'm like, if they can just do half as good on the rest of the episodes,
Yeah,
because it really, a lot of the success of that show, I think, comes down to the writing. I mean, definitely the visual,
it's
without a
it's
doubt.
very
But
funny,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not Family Guy. See, this is the thing, though, Brandon. Family Guy is wholly dependent on the writing. I mean, it's. I don't know if you ever worked on it, but like Family Guy, the visuals that are there, everything is written in the script. It's very descriptive,
yeah,
and they have a very set philosophy with how they do approach their storyboarding. Everything flat, everything parallel to the screen for the most part. And Harley, I would assume you guys are boarding. Like you're bored, you're not given like that kind of direction to it, right? To kind of to be, like you have to board it this way. Or am I wrong about that?
so I think it's a little of both, right? Like
Yeah.
Family Guy has been going on for decades now,
No.
so they have all those seasons of a show to establish their style, what works, what doesn't.
Right.
And Harley being a new show, it Jennifer Coyle just hired the people she knew. I guess she wanted that could pull off comedy and action,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whatever general notes there were kind of came throughout the season, through the direction and through notes.
Hmm.
And as a general rule, action, they said go nuts. There weren't any
Yeah.
rules for that except make it look cool. Comedy plays better,
Flat.
proscenium staging, flat.
Yeah.
And I kind of had experience with that before, so I just tried to bring that to Harley.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the because I think every show has something unique about it, and
Yeah.
there isn't quite a do this, don't do that. Although, no, wait, I take that back. Um, we did get kind of a guide, and it was not just, here's what works for Harley Quinn, but here's what works well for TV animation,
Yeah.
and here's what doesn't work well.
Well,
So,
I always, one of the things is getting through and talking to the class what the common thread they'll probably hear as we get more into it a little bit, is, you're boarding a lot of times for the limitations that you have for animation, like whether the studio's any good, how much they're able to handle, what they handle well, what they don't handle well. So
Yeah.
you're kind of at the mercy of that as the board artist. Like, even though you could do some elaborate, crazy, tricked out action sequence, if the animation studio can't handle that and doesn't have the personnel to handle it, you're going to get back. You could have the most beautiful looking board, and it's going to come back looking pretty bad if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
That's
what
kind
everybody
of the,
sees.
the risky part of TV animation, right?
Yeah, right.
What
Exactly.
studio's going to get it, and how much are they going to farm out, and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but if you can make your boards kind of studio proof, it helps.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been told on many shows, definitely not Harley, to pull back on an intense action scene because the studio wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
In general, it's mostly like, don't do a wide shot of panning with people walking, just because the feet don't match up to the
Common
background.
the common rule in any storyboarding, but particularly in action, is you never stage characters walking wide, seeing everything in a
Yeah,
shot where they're walking up into perspective. It's always the don't do that kind of a shot
I
if you can
know, and I
help it.
still throw one in every once in a while.
Yeah, I've done it too. I've done it too.
Come on, they've
Right.
gotten better. They can do that.
Yeah, that's right. You're like, come on, I trust you guys. You guys can handle this.
Yeah, but
So,
it's even hard to board somebody walking toward the camera
it is.
convincingly, let
It is.
alone animated.
Well, especially actions when it's running. If Batman's running up into camera, the run is a lot more forgiving. Like, the action
Yeah,
stuff is more forgiving to do that with, but it's the thing of characters walking slowly up into camera. Butch Lukic was the when I was working on Batman Beyond, he was like, Clistic, don't board characters walking up into perspective.
yeah,
Because we did it all the time at Sony. Nobody ever said anything to us. That was where I had come from at that time when I
right.
first started on the show. And it made total sense. Like, when, he was the one who said they won't animate it well, it'll look bad. And then you kind of, you can see the logic behind it. It makes sense. Like you said, it's hard to draw that way. So and we'll kind of bounce back and forth a little bit, if you don't mind. Like, we'll talk a little bit about Transformers too, because I'd like to talk about the differences and the difference in thinking a little bit when it comes to boarding a CG show as
Mm.
opposed to boarding an action comedy. And I know, you were gracious enough and you spoke. We did this a few months ago, and that's actually is up on my website. It's on my YouTube channel, the discussion that we had, so people can actually deep dive a little bit into that if they want to.
Sure.
One like, for myself, like, talking about action comedy, a lot of the stuff in Harley, though, Brandon, like, the action plays right. Like, you're having funny shit happen within action stuff. It's not just, you have a bunch of action and you go flat and you have a joke, and then a bunch of action, you
Right.
go flat. So, I mean, it is definitely, especially the second season. The second season, you can see everybody was hitting their stride. People kind of knew where to go with it, how far you could push it. You were pushing things a little bit more. So a lot of that stuff in the second season with Darkseid and everything tended to feel a lot less flat for the jokes, but they still played and they still worked really, really well. Like, it was interesting to see some of that stuff because it went against the conventional thinking of, I mean, granted, you weren't doing like crazy tricked out anime shots for a lot of the jokes, but the jokes still came from the action.
Yes. Yes. So I think the distinction would be comedy during action, you don't have to go flat. When
Yeah.
it's them just hanging out and you
Talking.
know talking, then you don't want to get like a crazy upshot or
Yeah.
downshot or anything.
Yeah.
Um, but when it's in the midst of action, that I kind of love. And as you were asking that, I was trying to think what helped prepare me a little bit for that. And you've had this experience too, but boarding on Scooby Doo.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, because you're trying to, do action if they're running away from a monster, and keep the laughs in there too. So
Yep.
that might have been a good place where comedy blending with action, that's where
Scooby,
some of that experience came from.
for sure. Now, like I'd say within the last 15 years or so of Scooby, those some of those shows were, fairly um action oriented shows, way more
Oh
than
yeah.
they were with the comedy. But you still had to get the jokes in there. You're right. You had to put the jokes in there with them, the takes, the expressions. And you're right, like that does prepare you for something like Harley. I think that it's become a little more sophisticated. I think that the action comedy stuff isn't quite like, if you look at those maybe pre 2001 Scoobies, the action doesn't play as it plays a lot flatter. And
Yeah.
after that, once you kind of got our generation of guys in there kind of doing stuff, I think people pushed it a little bit more. And I think that, you did have those takes that were a little more exciting and interesting with the way that you would, present action and comedy. I boarded a bunch of stuff that had, characters like running at camera, and it would still get a laugh, because of the expressions, because then it's even more exaggerated. You'd go for the exaggeration of Scooby's face and the tongue and everything, and it'd run past camera, right? And then you have,
Yeah.
so you had those moments where you could play like the extreme for the laugh instead of the opposite way of being too flat and too proscenium arch kind of staging, for sure. So you direct on the show. So I'll show. Do you want me to show your boards for a second? You want to show some stuff and then talk, or you want to?
Yeah, maybe we can look at some scenes there. I sent you that link
Yeah, I
to
have
the
your. I
Vimeo.
got your
Um,
site here.
why don't we
So,
look at the first board? This is just kind of straight action.
the
It's not
Scarecrow and
totally
Batman. The Scarecrow
yeah,
and Batman.
Scarecrow and
Okay.
Batman.
Me-
Not as much humor in this one, but we'll do that one next, maybe.
Okay, sounds
Kind
good.
of mixing the comedy and
Yeah,
action.
let me pull this up, and I was looking at it, and then okay, here we go. So let me get it to here, and there we go. So okay, let me exit this for a second. Let me screen share, and then you can talk over it. Hold on, we're almost there. Do you have any sound on it, Brandon, or is it straight?
It should have sound, yeah.
Okay, so I didn't know if it did or not. All right, can everybody see it? We good? All right, here we go.
Your plan failed, Scarecrow. I've stopped the fear toxin. What's so funny?
My plan was to fail, and I failed successfully.
Talk, Crane.
I'll let the bombs do the talking, yeah?
What the hell is that?
Seems pretty self-explanatory. Big tower with Joker's face on it. Welcome to Joker's Gotham.
Sorry, Batman, you lose. Gotham is mine.
All right. I wonder how that one ends. That's
Right.
a great job.
Actually, it's now that I recall when it aired or is airing on DC Universe, they animated that. They cut it out to show a recap of the previous episode. So,
Did they really?
yeah, it made sense at the time, but I think if you buy the DVD, they're going to include that.
Oh, good.
in it.
Yeah, I don't remember that whole. Well, I do remember.
Yeah, because that was the beginning of episode
Oh,
13, the season finale, and I directed that one. And it's hard to give up boarding when you're a director. I always want to keep my hand in it, so I always grab like the first section
yeah.
to board, and I went crazy with the cleans. I really wanted this.
You did a great job. I love the Batman '89, the Danny Elfman soundtrack in there too. Running
Yeah,
through it.
that was a good call on editing.
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, your stuff always, you're a very good artist. So the stuff always looks really nice. And the thing that's nice too, and this is a big deal, like how you draw Harley for, Batman for Harley is a different look than Batman for, Justice League or Batman for, there's subtleties, but you really nailed it. Like that. I mean, that Joker is totally, everything is completely on model for that stuff. I mean, you really, really, really got those
Thank you.
models.
Yeah, that is kind of the one. If I have one, not it's not unique, but just I've been able to adapt to each style pretty good. My Scooby and Shaggy look a little more like my own version than the model sheets exactly, but
Yeah.
I always try to get as close to on model as I can.
Yeah, you always have. You've always yeah. I know that. I know that from working with you. Your work is always, beautiful. It's always nice to look at. So
That's nice of you to say. Thank you.
no, of course it's true. It's only nice because it's true. So it's but the now in kind of talking about that sequence a little bit, because it's a pretty straightforward action sequence. I mean, there's
Yeah.
not really much in there that has, I mean, that would be, I would say that sequence is about as actiony as you're going to get on Harley Quinn, with the fighting and the the bombs going off. Was there anything in particular that like that you felt about that sequence? Anything that you'd want to bring up or talk about, like boarding wise?
Gosh, well, because we were so far along in the process that background design was already kind of falling behind,
Yeah.
I sketched out that background as like a jumping off point, and it just stayed.
Yeah.
With the 3 bridges and stuff, and then a later version of it was actually used in the show. At the end, Gotham's been hit by an earthquake and it's on fire. So I drew it in Photoshop.
Yeah.
And when it was all the bridges weren't broken, the buildings were whole.
Yeah.
And then I did another layer of Gotham City all jacked up. And
You did a
so
fine
that's
job,
where
my friend.
digital drawing made it kind of easy. I guess you could have done it on a light box as well, but it was an easier scene because there's 2 characters
Right.
basically, going back and forth.
It's not Young
It's a little
Justice.
more complicated.
It's,
What's that?
it's not Young Justice.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm drawing some boards for that now.
are you?
The number of characters is blowing my brain. It's
Yeah.
I mean, I've kept up with the series, but actually boarding on it, wow.
Brandon likes
because-
it.
and here's why. One of the board artist's job is to help the characters act. You're not designing them, you're putting them in the scene and you're posing them out. And where our creativity comes in is how we pose those characters and make them come alive, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What is their mood when they're saying this line of dialogue? How do they emote? How do they fight? And so when you have a relatively small group, Superman's gonna punch differently than Batman might, or they have different powers. So that's the really fun thing about boarding action, and especially superheroes, is how do you make each character's moves or attitudes unique? And you can do that in Young Justice too, as long as you know each character and their back.
It's tough because like a show like Young Justice you have 10 million characters in it. And if you're not familiar with like who Blue Beetle is, it's
Yeah.
sometimes not having that backstory. Even if you have his backstory, it's harder because he's not a character that's readily identified. But I guess on the plus side, if you're boarding him, you get to help define him somewhat as well. But the challenge, that's the challenge. It's like, how do you define him? What do you decide? Is he an awkward fighter? Is he, where is his strengths and where is his weaknesses? But yeah, that all comes into play for sure. You have to know that, and you have to choreograph all of that. You can't just willy-nilly throw everything in there.
Yeah.
And, I was telling these guys about blocking and staging. I showed a video about, and got, like, hey, like, I'll show, like, I show it to all of my storyboard classes, and some people push back on it because they're like, oh, I don't want to draw those dots. And like, that seems boring. And it's like, if you're not putting a map in there somewhere of where some of those characters are, where your camera is, you can lose track of that stuff really, really fast. And
very easily. Yeah.
Yes.
When, especially a dialogue scene or a fight scene with more than two characters, and you're trying to keep within the 180 rule, and it can get crazy complicated.
It can, sure.
Yeah, without a doubt.
One of the things about it that's nice about the blocking and staging, like they showed like this clip from Minority Report, and it's a scene where the one guy is in there, and he's kind of he's the guy who is investigating, the attorney general's investigating the whole crime unit, and the other guys are all they're the cops, and they're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And what they used in the blocking and staging was like they're all grouped together at one point, and then when they kind of make a division into like what each group taking sides, like I think it's bad, and the other group's like I think it's good, they all separate. But they use the blocking and staging, like the little dots, and just move them over is like the example of, and I love that kind of stuff because it's metaphor, and it's all about how you're, and sometimes I think if you get too caught up in choreography with characters and everything, and you don't do that, you're losing an opportunity, because I think it's easier to do it when it's the dots to do that kind of thinking, than it is to do the, when you're in the middle of a big fight sequence. And have characters punching, and then you're just trying to get through the sequence a lot of times, and like, okay, what can I do to make this really cool and make this fun and and expressive in play?
Well, I mean, and good fight scenes tell a story also. Not just is the good guy going to beat the bad guy, but you can throw other subtle things in there. One of the best storyboards for a fight scene I'd ever seen was on G.I. Joe Resolute. And that was like a 1 hour G.I. Joe story broken up into 5-minute segments. You can see some on YouTube. It was on Adult Swim. It was directed by Joaquin Dos Santos, who study his boards if you can ever find them.
The boards were up for that,
Action.
Brandon.
What's
The boards were up for that at one time, and I can't find them anymore. They're
I
beautiful
think they're
storyboards.
on the DVD.
Oh, are they?
That's where DVDs can kind of beat streaming is the special features.
Because it was up at one time many years ago. That whole sequence, the board sequence, I remember it was the missile that got shot into the Pentagon or whatever it was, or the UN, and it was like a tracking shot with the missile, and and I mean, I know Joaquin, I've known him for many years, and and actually that was right after, as a matter of fact, I was at Disney, he was at Disney, and he left and he went to Titmouse, and Titmouse did that, and he directed on it, and that sequence just blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, like he was brilliant before that, but he took it to a whole other level. Right.
But there was a fight between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. Mm-hmm. So it was just one-on-one, and there were little flashbacks in the beginning that helped set the stage, which was great because then the fight carried the story on. and it was not just cool action moves and great shot choices. Um, thanks. I saw the chat. Here's my
Oh, my
cat.
cat. Yeah, we have lots of pet owners over here. My kitty's with my daughter right now. She's been like, kidnapped with the cat, but the cat is.
Yeah, they've loved having me around a lot more since March. But yeah, good fight scenes can help tell the story, and it's not just, ooh, that was a cool hit or a cool power effect. If you can convey anything as far as character or plot along, it's outstanding.
There's a great video. I'm going to actually show it to the class when we're done, when we wrap up. You're welcome to stay and watch it if you want, but it's James Bond and it's action. It's the Daniel Craig Bond, and they're talking about action defining character. And it's a great little, segment and sequence to kind of, where they show the visuals and they show the, descriptions of how the action defines who he is when he,
Yes.
from Casino Royale and everything. And I think Casino Royale is just absolutely brilliant. I think for a live action film, the study is brilliant.
Every Daniel Craig James Bond film is amazing.
Yeah.
I was not a huge Bond fan earlier.
Me either.
A lot of them.
They're too silly. I always thought they were silly.
Right.
Campy. Yeah, I just thought they were silly and campy.
And there's still a tiny bit of camp to it, but they're written so well. Daniel Craig acts them so well, and they're directed brilliantly with all those action. And Bond's character in the action, just how awesome he is. Sometimes he's overwhelmed, and he finds a clever way out of it.
I found, like, when I was setting this class up, I always do like video things and show videos to the class. And, I was looking for some good action action reference type things to show. And that Bond, they had a ton of them. And the other one that I showed, and I showed this last week to the class, was the difference between all the Bonds that preceded the Daniel Craig ones. Because there was a mindset that went in there with cinematography, with how they used the camera, that they were a lot more dynamic with it, that they were more, that the thinking, there was actually more cinematic thinking. Instead of just setting a camera somewhere and having characters walk through the scene, it was more about what's going on in the scene. Can we show this and pan over and then reveal something, or can we set it lower to really for more impact? So it was all of those kinds of thinking. And it's amazing because they would show similar scenarios in the Bond movies, like that show Pierce Brosnan and that show like a sequence, and then they show the Daniel Craig stuff, and it was just way more interesting to look at. You're like, oh, that's way more visually interesting, And I think
a quick tag on that. I recall some of the 80s Bond films with Roger Moore, pretty good action. There was like a ski scene in Moonraker or Spy Who Loved Me or something that was pretty awesome.
They always had their set pieces. They had set pieces that were in there. They had to. I mean, that's
action, part of the deal, right?
Yeah.
Open with a great action stunt scene, have one in the middle and have a grand finale at the end.
Well, True Lies, that's one that people kind of forget about, and how well done True Lies. I mean, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, that and James Cameron, I thought that movie had some brilliant setups and action sequences in it. The way that it was set up, and then that was actually an action comedy. You went from like this amazing action piece, and then it went to like almost like a sitcom with the,
You're totally right, and having Tom Arnold in there.
Exactly. Right, exactly. You could put him in anything and you could get a sitcom. So yeah. So action, like when you're doing, God knows, I love doing, I know you're probably the same way. Like I love doing action stuff. Like I do love to get the action set, a set piece of something, and you're like, okay, but breaking it down is difficult. It's not an easy thing, like, because not every set piece that you do, you don't want to repeat yourself all the time. You want to kind of have differences in the way you handle things. That's half the fun of doing it. Whenever you get an action sequence, like, what is your process with it, Brandon? Like, let's say on Young Justice, let's talk about Young Justice. Well, and then because we can talk about Harley, we did talk about it a little bit. So like on Young Justice right now, you're boarding it. So what, what's like, you get the script. So what do you do?
Um, not a whole lot different, only because I'm brand new on Young Justice. This will
Yeah.
be like my second episode I've ever boarded on the show. But like I do with any script, action, comedy, whatever, but specifically action scenes, there's a process called visualization. You read the words on the script and images pop in your head of what would this look like.
Hmm.
From all of us, from when we started reading prose in books without pictures, we had to use our brains to, okay, what does this character look like? Is the author describing the setting well? And you're making the pictures in your head. And so I read it once. I may get a few ideas for shots. I'll just scribble them down. And this is like shorthand scribbles. They're not
Hmm.
complicated. They're just like, lollipop heads and stick figures. And so that I can read those notes later when I go to actually draw it in Storyboard Pro.
Yeah.
So I'll do a few scenes like that. And then I sit down and um, like I do well, you're not going to be able to read what this is, but
No, that's okay.
get the light on it. Just a piece of typing paper with literal thumbnail sized
Hmm.
panels blocking out each shot, several panels within each shot if there's movement. And this is my rough draft.
Yeah.
And from here, it's a lot easier to kind of edit before I even draw a thing in the computer. Um, and just the more you do, the easier it gets, but none of them are really easy, right?
No, 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 and that's half the
And
fun. I mean, that they're never easy because it's they should. I don't think they should be.
like,
It's like you're right. Like they should be complicated and hard, and when you're working on them for sure.
right, and who wouldn't love a new challenge with each new script or each new show? Um, and I try to keep in mind what has been established before. In if the show's already been made. With Harley, we were lucky we got to start from scratch,
Yeah,
which was really nice.
yeah,
Um, but I've been absorbing more and more Young Justice. The shots are beautifully laid out, very dynamic.
yeah.
And so I'm trying to absorb what they do well in that show and try to apply it to how I'm going to lay out an action scene.
You bring up a couple of points that I wanted to touch on. One is the characters on Young Justice for sure are the animation. There's a lot more foreshortening. There's a lot more dynamicism in the shots. It's the cameras are definitely the camera angles are much more extreme than probably even like where you in Harley, your low angles are here, but in Young Justice,
Yeah,
down here
you're like
somewhere.
dug into the
Yeah.
ground to look up.
Right.
So,
You're like in the Earth's core looking up at, Aqualand, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So, but that's part of it too. Like the second point, you're working on an established show. You're working on a show that has, so you can't just, it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you have to respect what's been done and you can't veer so far away from it. But at the same time, there's a level of like, okay, how now that this is established, I can maybe push this a little bit and do something that hadn't been done before, or at least something that I can be a little more dynamic with because you already know the parameters of the show, as
yeah,
opposed to creating everything from scratch where you're kind of locking yourself in a little bit, maybe more than you restraining yourself a little more and then pushing it forward. These guys have been doing Young Justice for 10 years now. So it's
right.
like there's a lot more information visually that you have. So now it's like, hey, okay, I know what the show looks like. And
And one of the reasons I'm really loving working on it is that it's pushing me
yeah,
because a lot of shows I've done, that super exaggerated foreshortening isn't the norm. Now I get to try it out, you know, and see if I can pull that off. It's helping me practice that form of action storytelling.
It
Other
looks
shows may not have that.
well, I mean, it looks to me like the first couple seasons of that show, they really did. In the animation, I thought was just outstanding. I don't know who they had. I don't know if they had, what studio to do the animation for them. But those first couple of seasons were just absolutely brilliant because it never looked bad. Like the animation, they were pushing stuff and you're like, you could see where if you had a bad studio, that could go south really quickly. And they
Yes.
really did a great job of the animators did a great job. And and I think they should be applauded too, because, we both know that like you can get a beautiful storyboard. And if you get a crappy studio or a studio that just doesn't, it just destroys all that beautiful board work. It's, and that's the final product. There's nothing more discouraging, not even when it's even your own work. It's like the work of somebody else. And you're like, oh, that was a beautiful board. And they just didn't nail it overseas, and there's nothing you can do. You can't save it in retakes or anything once you're doing it.
Yeah, that is disappointing. Somebody I saw in the chat asked a question about how do you make storyboards, what was the term I used? Just animation proof.
Yeah.
And, if it's given to a bad
Studio
studio.
proof. Studio
And
proof.
while
Yeah,
we're on Young Justice, one of the producers is Brandon Vietti, and he is really, really good at knowing what works and what doesn't, and how to make a board animation proof, to the point where if you do have a wide still shot, not a camera move, but say a down shot of somebody walking, if you board every single footfall, every time a character's foot touches the ground, you're basically giving them key animation
key layout, right.
and that's one way you can animation proof your board.
Unless you're not a good animator yourself.
Exactly. You have to be really good at animation.
Yes,
and that's where Storyboard Pro helps, because you can play it back.
Sure.
I think TV animation got better once Toon Boom and Storyboard Pro became the norm, because we could make our animatics instantly instead of boarding it on paper, chopping it up, putting it in edit, and then seeing if it works.
I agree. I think that there's, especially because the board artists can time their own work a little bit too.
Yes.
And I do think I think it's a double-edged sword. Brad and I talked about this last week about how, Marvel, they got rid of sheet timers. They got rid of their sheet timers towards the end.
Right. I hate that it puts people out of work, I don't love that.
No, so, and also I do think, like, I know, some of our timers, we had a guy at Marvel who really overboarded. Like he was like you're talking about what Brandon said, but he did it everywhere. And the sheet timer threw out half of what he did. And this guy had no life. He was working weekends and he was working, and that shouldn't be the norm. Like that to me is like, you need to have a life, to be able to do this too. But you're right. Like Storyboard Pro, you could animate the damn thing if you want to.
You more or less can. And
sure. But plenty.
Don't animate in Storyboard Pro.
No, if you're going to animate
I
Harmony.
came across this where, both when I was directing and I was helping clean up boards, if you have panels that are 2 frames long, that's animation. That's not storyboards.
Right.
We're giving them key poses. We don't want to animate it.
Well, my wife's an animator, and she always said she's a CG. She's been CG for a long time, but one of the things that she said coming from, as an animator, she hated boards that were too much, that they were posed out too much, because she said she felt that it took away her creativity. Like she had to follow a lot of that stuff. And I do think that sometimes it takes some of the soul out of what's being done, but that's a discussion for some other time.
No, that's a good point though, that you can overboard your stuff.
Yeah. And I do think there's a danger to that. But let's talk more about, so your thumbnails, this is, you work pretty much how I work. I think a lot of people from, again, like we've made that leap into digital, but we came from paper and pencil and boarding.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
can't let it go
no, I
entirely.
can't either. I can like, I have no problem digitally working, and to boom, but what I still need to do that paper pass, because it's just something about it to me is very freeing, and just sitting there, and I don't know if it's just the pen touching the pen, I don't know what it is, but like I can fly through my thumbnails when I do that. When I
Yep.
try to thumbnail just in Storyboard Pro, it slows me down way too much. Like I get
It
too caught up in it.
it does me too. I was asked to try that on a show, and I did, and it it slowed me down
Yeah.
way, way, way too much. And but it may work great for
Right.
some
It's
younger animators.
well,
So I don't
people.
discourage it,
It's the
but it's
biggest
just not my
question.
bag.
Well, it's the biggest question I always get, and people ask. They're like, "What's your process? How do you work?" And I always tell people how whatever works for you. Like if you have to stand on your head and do
Right.
thumbnails, right? It's like whatever gets the job done. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong to this. So it's just what works. And for me, and just saying it, like when you're showing me the thumbnails, it's like, yeah, Brandon works exactly like I work. It's
Yeah.
like, because I need that. I like seeing that canvas of everything on the thumbnails, because instead of watching it panel by panel, there's just something about seeing the whole thing and how it kind of plays in a way that you're just seeing the big picture. You know what I mean? It's like you can't
Yes.
and then it's, I don't know, like I like that. I like being able to take it all in, and then you can go, okay, that didn't work. And then when you put it in, like I'll scan my stuff usually, or I'll
Okay.
take a picture of it or whatever with my iPhone, and then I'll cut and paste, and just to give me a loose, quick thing, I'll take those pencil drawings and plop them in, and then I see how they play digitally.
Nice.
I see how they'll flow. And that way, to me, it's like, because that's when you start to see what works and what doesn't work. You're like, okay, that was a good idea as
Right.
a thumbnail, not so good here. And so to me, that's how I work. Like I'll do it that way. I'll even take the pencil drawings, scan them in, cut them out, and plop them in, and then just kind of see how it flows and how it feels, and then I'll piece it together that way. And that's when I start working digitally. That's when I start going in and kind of thumbnailing
Yeah.
more and putting more and fleshing it out. So
That's interesting. My process from thumbnail to Storyboard Pro, once I have the thumbs down, I kind of start drawing in
yeah,
almost finished backgrounds and then doing layout. Like
wow,
each shot, I just draw where like the main panel of where all
yeah,
the characters are going to be. And then I go in and pose them out.
yeah.
So, everybody's process is different. I
Everybody's
saw a
process is
great
different.
comment. Somebody, I didn't catch who said it, but saying that maybe one reason it's hard to thumbnail in Storyboard Pro is because the panels aren't thumbnail size.
You could take it all the way down. You could.
Yeah,
You could. You
I
could.
mean, you could
Could.
draw tiny in the frame,
I know
but
guys that do that.
I hear what you're saying, that whoever commented, you see a panel border and you're like, I'm going to fill that panel. And it's very hard to draw quick and loose if you're on the thing that is about to be the finished product, maybe. I don't know.
Well, what
Everybody,
what gets me, it's like it's the camera. It's like if I want to do a camera move, and then it stops me. Like I'll start to thumbnail, and it's like, okay, I want to do a pan or do some camera move, and then I start to play with the camera tool, and all of a sudden I'm out of that mindset of just sketching and drawing. Like it takes me out of it.
there's a flow,
Yeah,
right?
it
That's
takes me out of
one
the flow.
reason the tiny thumbnails on paper work for me is, you know, everything's silent. I'm not interrupted. I'm focused on the script. I know the characters. I know the story. And I can thumbnail out tons of shots all at once,
Yeah,
which I'm not worried about cutting up a
right.
scene and renumbering it. And,
Yeah,
I'm just drawing a box and a triangle for a cut symbol. And I'm scrolling in, okay. And I find that flow is much easier to attain. And that's where the storytelling gets done.
Yeah.
What shot goes into the next, and does it work, as it's flowing off the script page into your brain, out your hand. And that's one of the funner parts of
That's the
boarding.
most
when
fun
you
for
really
me. Like that process is the most fun for me. And it's the same thing with when they're tiny little drawings. I can't tell you how many times like I'll in the course of like I'll look back at older scripts like when I'm showing people some of my scripts because I always thumbnail usually right off the script
I
itself.
used to do that too. Yeah,
And I show people like I sometimes none of it. I like it's amazing to me how little of it I'll actually use towards the end because you just refine it and it's like, oh, that shot, even though that shot worked, like you come up with something that's a variation of it or something. And it's always amazing to me, like, okay, the general idea was here, but the actual execution of the shot becomes something much different once you're in there. But I think there's something really vitally important about like we're saying for me the flow and whatever can get you going. Like I know people that will work in Storyboard Pro. There's a thumbnail, you can thumbnail, like you can actually draw inside those little thumbnails, you know what I mean, like down below, and it'll
Okay.
draw on the thing.
Oh my God, I never knew that. Here's
Yeah.
the thing, everybody listening in the class, I am so far away from a Storyboard Pro expert. It's like Photoshop. I always say it's an amazing program. It can do 1,000 things. I only need it to do 10. So
Right,
I
and
know
that's the
those
things you
10
focus on. Sure.
really well.
Yeah.
Same thing with Storyboard Pro. There's somebody who's another board artist on Young Justice, and she's, she helped beta test, I think, with Toon Boom, who
Yeah.
was, made a video of, oh, and you do this and you set this shortcut. And I'm like, wow, I had
Yeah.
no idea.
I think that I think especially younger artists, like they don't work the way that we work. Like we were working, like I said, pencil and paper, so that's what we were comfortable with. But
Yeah.
they're comfortable working digitally. That's how they went to school. That's how they trained. So they know the shortcuts, and those shortcuts are important. They do make a difference. Some of the things that and the hotkeys and different things that you can do and manipulate it for sure. But yeah, dude, like one of the things you can do is you can set it so you can draw within those little thumbnails, those little, icons at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
It has to be in the thumbnail mode. But once you do that, then you can set it in your preferences and your system preferences. And it will draw in there, and then it'll draw on the as you go. I still don't like it. I still don't. I tried working that way a couple of times. I'm like, just like I have my system. It's like
Right.
I have what I do, and it has what
And
it
when you
works.
get something that works, why shake it up and change it? If you're meeting deadlines and the
Right.
stuff looks okay, how you get there, there's so many different ways.
There
Yeah.
are, and somebody's asking if it works in grid view. I don't know. I've never tried it, Jason. I can't tell you. Like the thumb, like Brandon's saying, like you do what you do. And I know a lot of tricks, and I'll show you guys a lot of stuff. It was really like I have a whole couple videos to show you about shortcuts and that's just tonight. But there's a lot of tricks and a lot of things that you could do. But drawing thumbnails for like I said, that I've never used a grid tool to do it with. So I don't know, and I
Try
just
it out.
yeah,
If it
try. Well,
works,
he's
great.
saying he
If it
couldn't
doesn't,
he can't figure it out. And I'm
yeah.
sorry, I can't tell you because I've never tried it that way. But I've used them as the thumbnails at the bottom of the screen and drawing. All right, so let's get past. So we're past the thumbnail stage.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get to the cleanup stage of this, the roughs. Let's take it to the roughs. So, for me, for myself, and I know this for you because I've worked with you, the structure, that's where you start to kind of structure and put and kind of, you're not worried about the actual hitting everything completely on model, but you are worried about size relationships and you're worried about structure at this point. So, and everything, the composition and clarity, those things are
Yes.
the keys, are the crucial elements. Would you
So
agree?
I would say that the thumbnails are where you're worrying about the storytelling,
Yeah.
picking the right shots in the right sequence to convey what's happening. The roughs are where I'm more worried about composition and layout, size comps, just like you said, perspective, making sure the shot itself works, and you've got enough depth of field. Things are in the foreground, midground, background. Still loose, although my roughs, I've been told, are as tight as some cleans. I definitely kill myself doing too much detail on roughs, but that is might be the hardest part, but also the funnest part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Like to me, wow, to me, I love the thumbnailing. Like when I start to get to the cleanup, it becomes some people love the cleanup. I don't. Like I never did. I always, I just find it boring. Like I want to go and board the next thing. Like
Yeah,
I'm like, I did this. I don't feel like redoing this again
I
and
think
cleaning it up. You know what I mean?
my dream board job would be just give me a
Yeah.
script and I'll rough it all out. I
Have
don't
somebody
want to
else
touch
clean
it
it up.
after that.
Adam Van Wyck, Adam Van Wyck has his whole, like, he had the right idea. He has a studio, he has his little studio system going. He used to hire, like, my God, he hired some really brilliant Disney animators we were friends with to do some of his boards for him. Not the boarding, but the cleanup. And they
Yes.
would do, and people were like, oh my God, like this cleanup's amazing. And it's like,
Yeah.
but you had Adam's brilliant staging is brilliant, and Adam's a good animator and a great artist. But he would, on top of that, you'd have, this guy's named Mark Coutier. He's actually a director. I think he's either at Netflix. He was at DreamWorks for many years. Brilliant animator, and he had Mark do his stuff for him. But cleanup, and it's like, oh my God, that stuff's like brilliant. It's like that's the right idea. It's like if you can find enough gigs to just rough everything out and then pay somebody else to clean it up.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because that's where, I mean, it takes me longer to clean up a board than it does to thumb it and rough it out.
Me too.
Because I haven't, after boarding for 20 years, I haven't found that loose but clear style yet.
Shorthand tough, man. It's tough, right?
I come from comics,
Me too.
Yeah, that I used to draw every bolt on every robot and Transformers, and every buckle on a GI Joe outfit, and it's like, stop. I didn't know what quite to simplify. I wanted it to look
right,
like every panel like a comic book panel.
I was envious of the guys, the animators who had that clean line and that like gestural line of everything, and you're like, oh my God, like that line says so much. But we weren't, but I wasn't an animation fanboy at all. I was all comics, it was all, for me, it was very much, I don't know if you, like, I wasn't big on animation when I was a kid. It was all comics for me. So I had to kind of come into it as I was a storyboard artist. Because I was never an animator. Now today, I do feel, and I see it in your work too, dude, like, it's funny how we evolve because of all the pencil mileage. Your stuff does have a very nice feel to it, and it's, even though you may not see it in your work. And I feel like I've kind of started to, I have that in my work now too, where it's just all the years of doing it that we become that because we had to, and we've had to become animators almost because, or at least key layout people, because of Storyboard Pro. So you really do have to understand the process more than what we did back on Static days or Batman days or Justice League. We have to think a little differently now because everything is looking in the animatic and has a flow to it.
Yes, yeah, and I saw somebody said in the comments, finished but not perfect. That's a great philosophy.
Yep.
As long as you can tell who the character is, whether that's by color coding them, like doing a paint behind, that helps.
Yep.
But all the noodly details are going to be redrawn overseas anyway.
Right.
So, if you want to do a beautiful, clean board, that's for you, for your portfolio. The Batman board we just showed, I drew in every detail because I'm like, I want to keep
portfolio piece. That's your
I want to put it on my reel.
Yeah,
so.
and in every art, I mean, we all do that, right? It's all like, okay, this is, you did a nice sequence, and you're like, that's, the thumbnails look really good. I'm really happy with them. Now I want the whole piece so I can put it on, for my portfolio, of course.
Yeah, but be careful because it'll make you miss some deadlines and cause a few sleepless nights or very short amounts
Yes,
of sleep. So,
yes, and the
um,
anxiety and the stress that comes with it as well. For
yeah.
sure.
Dave, what do you think about looking at one more board, just
And
talking about
so
action and comedy?
yes. So
Um,
yeah, because I know, like, dude, I don't want to keep you for, I always, tell you, like, it's,
I feel like we could talk for 3 hours
yeah, well,
straight.
that's the thing about this. So what do you want me to show, Brandon? What do you want me to
The
show?
third one on there,
The Tawny,
it's
the
yes.
D13.
Now this one is not clean. This is kind of what my roughs look like. Maybe some of it's clean. I can't remember. I think most of it is rough, but um, this was where we were trying to mix in jokes, with and gags with an action scene.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, you set it up. You ready to go?
Yeah, it's basically Harley Quinn trying to find a new nemesis, and all she can get is Robin, and Batman shows up, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on.
All right. Oops.
Harley, what the fuck do you think you're doing?
It's getting heated!
Are you trying to steal my Batman?
Joker.
Batman. Joker seems to claim you as his nemesis, but you came here to fight Harley, and now you're fighting Ivy. Which one is it?
Me! I'm his, he's mine. I mean, we're together. Ha!
Oh! It's getting heated!
All right.
Yeah.
Yay, nice stuff.
So actually, a lot of that got cut out of the show. Again, it got animated, and you might be able to find it on the DVD. But
Did the Aquaman on the crapper, did that stay in? I don't remember. Did it stay in? Okay.
Yeah. Carl came up with that and added it in. What was really fun about that whole extended third act was the director, Juan Mazaleon, and me and the other board artists, we all got in and brainstormed because there was a lot of that in the script, but a lot of it we helped write too, some of the beats. And then we split it up into 4 parts, and we kind of came up with other heroes watching the fight happen. In the actual animated version, we cut away to Kite Man, we cut away to Superman and Lois, and this was one of my favorite scenes because how it started from the roughs to how it came out in the end was a very step-by-step iterative process, and it came out really well. I was so happy with it all.
It's Harley it's just a great show, dude. Like, you should be so proud of that show. Like, you guys, it's just a fun show. It's a fun show, and it works on every level. The jokes are hilarious. The writing is really good, but everything about it is good. Like, the action stuff plays really well. The atmosphere that, it never feels like you're watching one or the other. Like you're just watching a
Mm.
comedy. It never feels like you're just watching an action show. It just feels seamless. Like it's a really, really good show. And that
Thank
sequence has a lot of that stuff in it. Like the thinking, you can see the thinking behind it. And I can see why you put it up on your site, because it's, it's not like anally tight stuff, but my God, it has such nice life to it. It's you got so much life. When he's coming down the stairs, just real quick, when he's coming down the stairs, that's my favorite part of that whole thing. I think when he's like kicks the woman, the Joker like
Right.
kicks the woman. Like it just has such life to it. He's angry. Like there's an anger to the way he's coming down. Like it's really well done.
I think that was, I don't know, somewhere in between a rough and a clean. It reads fine.
Yeah.
And I wish there were times I could stop myself and say, quit. It doesn't need any more.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
we
I
always
don't
think that they
have
want
to-
more. I think we think they want more sometimes, and that's why we do it. I
Yeah.
think we think that. And it probably not. Like in watching that board, it has so much fun life to it and energy. Was that the final board? Was that the final?
Yes, they ended up again cutting a lot of scenes out in the final.
Well, what I
animal
mean is,
book.
did you clean it up anymore? Did you take it
I
any?
don't think I cleaned it up any more
Good
than
for
that.
you.
We
Like
didn't
that
have
looks great.
time.
Yeah, it looks great, dude. It looks great. Like
Yeah,
that's just a really nice, clean board, and just so much life and energy and fun to it. It's great. Yeah.
yeah, and the show came out great, and yeah, it's been really, really fun. I'm excited to get going on the next season.
Yeah, congratulations. That's awesome. You guys really deserve, I didn't think you weren't going to get, I would have been shocked if they didn't pick it up for a third season.
Right?
Yeah, I'd have been shocked. Like, although then again, Warner's does really stupid shit. So I guess that's true.
They had to
Yeah.
figure out how it was all going to get paid for and what, service it was going to be on. And I think that was all the big delay.
The big delay. Yeah. But I
it
mean,
wasn't
it's
for
just
the
great.
quality of the show. you know?
No. You should be real proud of it. I think it's for, I would consider it a highlight for me if I was on it for sure. Like it's a well done show. And
Yeah, just it's been the best job of my career.
good. That's
How the
nice to
show
hear.
came out to all the people on the crew and me getting to be a part of it, I felt really, really fortunate.
Well, they're lucky to have you, buddy. Like you do such great stuff. I mean, it's like, so I'm glad that you say that though. It's nice to hear, because it's like, there's too many times in our careers where you work on stuff and you're not, for whatever reason. It's nice that when you're on something, and it's nice that you appreciate it in the moment too with it. You're like, oh, this is great stuff.
I definitely knew as we were putting it together.
Yeah.
There were days where it was very hard.
Sure,
That's
of course.
That's work,
Of course.
but the overall mood and, every show is going to be like a different chemical compound. You add this bit with that mixture mixed with that,
Yeah.
meeting all the people, and every show is going to be a little different. And just for me, it came out, wonderfully.
Yeah, you've done a great job. Like you should be real proud of yourself. Like it's just a fantastic show. And, and it's not surprising. I mean, looking at all the people that are on that show, it's not surprising at all. So Jennifer cast well. She got her crew. So
She knows what she's doing, right? And to go back, you mentioned Adam Van Wyck. Love that guy as a person and as a board artist.
Yep.
One of the best in the industry.
Oh,
Talking
by far,
about
sure.
being able to do superhero action comedy, just comedy. I especially early on in my career, when I would break down a board, I would try to think, what would Adam do?
Yep.
And my boards would, if they were half as good, I was happy. But he's always the bar I'm aspiring to reach toward.
Me too. I mean, he's a reason why I'm in the business. I mean, and he was there for, on different things. He got me in, and my wife worked with him at a place called Creative Capers, and this was before he worked at Warner's, and he got me my first animation storyboarding gig out here. And then when he was on at Warner's, he got me in on Batman, with the Batman stuff. So yeah. So, and he and I developed like several things. We actually did a Young Justice pitch. We have about an 8-minute, fully rendered, fully colored animatic of Young Justice, way different than what the show was. And we almost sold it. So anyway, it's a whole other story. But
Yeah, I got to hear that.
yeah,
sometime.
so we almost sold it. We came very close. Matter of fact, Alan Burnett was very upset that they didn't buy it. He's like, that's exactly what the WB needs. Is this? It's just like it didn't work. We had a lot of people on our, but anyway, he's brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. Like he's just,
Yeah.
and he taught me a lot. It's a lot of stuff that I use to this day, and I'm trying to pay it forward and teach other people. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can't thank you enough. Like I know, for being here and talking, and I'm sure everybody here got a lot out of it. So
I hope so. And thanks for having me on. It's always nice to talk a little bit instead of drawing all day.
yeah, and it's just great because you have such nice insight too, and your stuff is so good, Brandon. Like, and you've had such a wide swath of stuff that you've worked on, and anybody that looks at your work can see just how outstanding it is and how good you are. So, and it's like, I'm trying to. I'm just trying to get I want to get like my friends on who know what they're doing and really talk about this stuff and really talk, and hopefully people that want to get into this business have an understanding of a lot of different things that go into it and thinking that has to go into it on how not one project is different, can be completely different from the other that you work on, but yet you're able to make those leaps and kind of go, because I think that's what keeps a career going, is that kind of
Well, and that's what keeps this job interesting. If I were working on the same show for 20 years, there are people who do that and they're great at it and they love it. What I love is I got to work on Harley for a year and a half.
yeah,
And then it was Scooby-Doo, and then it was a superhero DTV. And,
yeah,
you never get bored. And every script is slightly different. So you're drawing something new. I love a new challenge.
yeah, I do too.
And that keeps it fascinating for me.
Well, I think you bring it into the other work that you do. Like, I think those things, all those elements go into every other job going forward that you do. It's like,
Yeah. I try to pick up something new from each thing.
Yep.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Dave.
Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. So go feed your cat.
I know, right? He was harassing me there.
Yeah. So what's good? It's really good seeing you. When all of the COVID stuff, when we're through all of this stuff, I'll take you out to dinner. We'll go get I was gonna say go get drunk, but we won't have to do that. But we could go get some drinks. So
that sounds great.
Cocktails.
That sounds awesome,
yeah.
Dave.
So
Okay.
I definitely, I definitely can't wait till we can able to do that. But thank you, Brandon. Thank you.
Bet. And take care, everybody in the class. All right, have fun.
All right, buddy. Bye.
Wait. Oh, this is the
Yeah, you gotta click yourself off.
I know. What happened? Where's the leave button?
Let's see. There you go. You found it. So, all right, everyone. Did everybody feel, was that Brandon's pretty awesome. He's a good guy. So, okay. So now we're going to get to some actual work stuff. So I made some videos. And what I did was break down some things that are complicated on the surface, but in actual execution aren't. Now the video is pretty long. It's about an hour long. It's about 54 minutes long, but it breaks down the stuff that's here. Before I get to getting into showing this to you guys, is there anything that you wanted to talk about, like with the Justice League stuff first, or should we save it for after? Are there any thoughts that anybody has, or anything that you guys are like, Rebecca brought up the warehouse. If anybody's doing that part of the script, I didn't put the warehouse in on the Google Drive. It's up now. It's on there, and I have the link, and I'll send it to you if anybody wants that link for it. But are there any other thoughts of anything, or is there anything that you wanted to discuss before I got into this stuff?
I have a question.
Sure.
I was wondering, because I was seeing, like, even between you two, that sometimes, like, it's hard holding yourself back from cleaning. Do you have, like, an internal mechanism, or do you compare yourself to other artists? Like, when do you know you've hit that sweet spot between almost finished and actually, like, I feel like this is the always asked question, but so I'm sorry if I've asked this before.
Well, Haley, here's the thing. The the like there is no the deadline is kind of what dictates that a lot of times. You know, you it's it so in the beginning, I'll tell you, like when I'm first doing the board and I have weeks, maybe sometimes you have 2 or 3 weeks for cleanup. In the beginning, the cleanup is really tight, and I'll even get into like atmospherics if it's necessary. And then by the end, you're just like, you have like 3 days to finish, and you're just trying to belt through and get it done. So you start leaving things alone and I can honestly tell you, a lot of times when I go back and look at the boards, I like the stuff I did later than the stuff I did in the beginning. Like it just feels too tight and it feels too. So there's a point where you start to let things go. Um, and I think that it meant like in your own mind, you have to kind of say, okay, this has structure, this has volume, it has clarity, it reads, it's on model enough that I know who all the characters are. Everything looks nice enough, and you just let it go, and then you don't just keep noodling it. Like Brandon was saying, he would put every rivet on a GI Joe guy, render every bullet on his belt or whatever. You can't do that. Like you just don't. It doesn't look. They won't animate it well, and it's not necessary. Like little small details. It's like, think of it as film. You don't pay that much attention to like, all the mahotchkis on Captain America's costume in Avengers. It's like what he's doing is what you're paying attention to. And it's the same thing with animation. So if you're getting caught up in like all the accoutrements that a character has, or, that's not the point. The point is does it read? Does their acting read? Does their expressions read clearly? Are they on model? Are they the correct size? Is the composition appealing? Does the action read it? Because we're talking about action. Does the actions read? Or is there a clarity to the action and what you're doing? Because that's the most important thing. And that's the thing that we're going to get into with this, going forward now, is clarity of action and clarity of posing and clarity of, and doing it with the least amount of work that you can do, that it still looks really nice. Because that's the real key. If you're working in TV animation with action, especially a show, if you've never seen, Young Justice. Young Justice has like the whole goal of it, I think, is to show every superhero in DC's universe, and you have fight sequences and you have these elaborate like things. And I believe me, Brandon's not my only friend. I have a lot of friends who've worked on that show over the years, and they say how draining it is because you're drawing just all of these superheroes and you have to put them on model and they have to look in their costumes, they have to be there. So it's almost out of necessity that you have to develop a shorthand that works, because if you don't, you're there are deadlines and you're paid to meet the deadline. And you either say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice having a life, and at some point, maybe in the beginning of your career, it's like, oh, this is, but once you have kids, or once you're in it for any amount of time, you start to go, I want a life, I want to be able to do stuff. So it actually, out of necessity, your own mental state, everything, you start to force yourself to, it becomes a process of, do I have a career in this, or do I come in and try to, be amazing for a year and burn myself out to the point where I can't do this anymore and function? And there's a lot of people that happens to as well. And I don't want that to happen to anybody. So that's why, I'm trying with these classes and teach them the way that I teach them. I don't want you guys to kill yourself doing things. Learning shortcuts and learning how to save on drawing time is vital. And it's there for a reason to do these things, and to be able to take advantage of them are the things that are the most important aspects of the job. Because this job, working in storyboarding, can eat you alive. It can make you crazy after a while.
Right.
Um,
I totally agree and see that all the time. And by the way, will save your life. And I'm so
yes.
happy you taught me that. Um, so what would you recommend? So I've been trying to be like super loose because I was trying to unteach myself being really clean. What would
Mhm.
you say would be a marker then for
Here's
portfolio?
what I would tell you. I would say keep the structure of the bodies loose, but
Okay.
enough that the structure reads clearly, and focus on the faces and focus on the expressions.
Okay.
Heads and hands. That's that's usually the two crucial elements of clarity in a storyboard. Heads and hands. If you can draw your faces well and your hands well, that's the rest of it can be a little less tight. But if you get those nice, expressive, realistic hands, or at least realistic to whatever it is that you're working on, and really great faces and expressions, that's key. Those are the big things.
I think I absolutely answered my question right there, actually.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So, all right. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, Heads and Hands is a different guild class. Carl Ganas is awesome, and I'd recommend that class highly if he's still teaching it right now. Okay. Oh, it's a class taught by a figure drawing teacher named Carl Ganas, Gnass. Actually, if he has stuff when he does teach, he is teaching digital, through Zoom. And the next class he puts up, it's open to anybody. I'll send you the guys the link. I don't think he's doing head, hands, and feet right now, but he usually only does that like in February. That's usually when we were doing that at the guild. Like there's a January winter class, so I think it's January. It's like 6 weeks. It's like a 6 week or a 4 week class that he has. So, but it's a great class. Great class. I highly recommend it. And I will send you guys stuff because Carl puts his classes up through the guild just like I do. So I'll, because we're not there right now. So, but I'll show you, send you the links because the one advantage, if you don't live in Los Angeles, you can take Carl's class where you could have never done it before. And Carl's wonderful. Okay. So anyway, enough of pitching Carl, damn it. We're going to get into our class. Any other questions? Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about before I get into showing this stuff? Or we'll maybe save it for after these videos. Can I show it? We all set? We good? All right. So what I'm going to share with you, I'll set this up a little bit. I've been breaking down different action sequences from some of these shows and boards, and trying to explain how it's done and show you through, breaking it down. So anyway, the first one I'm going to show is Cora. It's an example from the Cora animatic. It's the part where they're fighting. And actually, I'm going to break down a couple of sequences more, at least one more from it. But I did break down the initial fight between Cora and the bad guy. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to play it for you. This video, forgive me if I ramble a little bit, but I did try to make sure that it's all instructional and it's all using Storyboard Pro and how it was broken down and how it was set up. So without further ado, hello everyone. Okay, so this is a breakdown of the Cora board that we just watched, the animatic, just a small segment of it. I'm going to break down a couple of key things in some kind of an order for you guys of relative importance to what creates a sense of movement and feel for a Cora type of show. So first and foremost, I brought these panels in and I didn't time everything out. Just the way it should be timed out, because I kind of want to show you timing is important. Actually, so it's something to pay attention to whenever you're boarding. You're able to adjust these panels, and you can actually go into your preferences, and if you go to project settings, you can actually set the length. Usually the default length is 1 second for a panel. Some people like to keep it smaller because very few scenes are going to hold for a second. But I keep it at a second because I like to split things and kind of adjust my timing as I go. But that is an option for you that you can do. So I'm going to click OK. So from this, and we'll try to sync this up as much as we can with the animatic, but it's not going to be perfect. So this sequence, this panel is probably a little too long. So you can see here the number, and that's the frames. When I touch this, you see the 19 that pops up, 20, 21, 22, 23. There's 24 frames per second in a frame of animation. So let's say that I want to make this maybe a half a second. It's 12. So let's see here. Even that's too slow. So I'll probably take it down to maybe there. Yeah, that's a little better. Even then, I might even take it down even further. Let's see here. Maybe I'll adjust this panel a little bit, because that's where I think there we go. So and the first panel, usually you want to stay on a little bit longer because this was a cut from the prior scene, and it was also a hookup for the action that was being done, the continuation of the action. So this is an establishing shot. So you want to be able to have it read. So usually I'll leave this on a little bit longer when I'm boarding, just so the audience can reorient themselves as to where we are. So that panel is a little longer, but the action is fast. So when the character explodes out of the hole, and then Cora follows, it's fast. The action should feel fast, and it should feel, I mean, if he was leisurely floating around, you'd extend the time, and then you kind of makes it feel a little bit slower. In this case, he's fast, so we want to adjust that. Okay, so that's part one of this. Part two, this is, again, it's always about hookups. So in this section prior, Cora is chasing him, and we want to continue that action. Being that this was in a wide, this becomes usually it's nice to follow something that's a wide with a foreground element or something bigger whenever you're to have contrast. So what's occurring in this scene is Cora is really in the foreground, and she's very large, and the background behind her is panning behind her, and I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that. But for the intents and purposes of the scene, this was just hand-drawn and was kind of panel by panel. It wasn't using the animated layer, which I will show you in a minute. So Cora's big in the foreground. The BG, this BG was not on an anim layer for this. This was just a couple of poses of BG that was put in to the frame. But this does go to what I've talked about in terms of dynamicism and larger foreground objects. So we want to give a sense that Cora is flying past camera somewhat, chasing. So there's an adjustment, as you can see with the background, that the background doesn't necessarily come straight at us. It actually goes more towards the side to readjust. And this is a trick to use when you're doing your boards, depending on which way your character is moving. You want that background to probably go in that same direction. That way it gives an illusion of a turn or a movement. So in this case, Cora is kind of turning away from camera slightly. So we readjust the background in movement to kind of convey that, to give that sense. So now there is debris that is coming in, that Cora is actually, it's going past her. So in this case, the debris comes in, she smashes through this rock, and it fills the camera. And what it does is it creates a wipe. A lot of times in animation, the studios will give out sequences of animation to different animators. And sometimes it's split even within the scene. So you might have two different animators working on the same scene. So sometimes the continuity becomes a problem, especially if there's no anything to split the sequence. So what we do sometimes is create wipes. And what that is basically, it gives the illusion of a continuing scene, but it actually acts as a split. So you have two scenes basically in one. So this is scene one, and then the wipe, and then this is scene two. So, but it feels seamless. And you can see the background is moving away from Cora as she flies through and punches the rocks. Okay, so this brings us to our next, and this section is a little more complicated. And this is the use of camera movement to create a sense of movement throughout a scene. This is the most common tool that we use today in animation, storyboarding for action especially. Basically what's going on in this scene is a fight that's going to take place. So the rock flies past him, he dodges, bounces off the rock. Cora gives chase as he kind of recomposes himself, and then she hits him and they go off camera. There's a lot of camera movement here to give the illusion of a tracking shot. So what the initial setup here is, it's wide to reestablish again the contrast from close up, to reestablishing where characters are. Very, very important thing. It's something that you should always be tracking in your board, because and you want to come back to this from time to time in an action board, because if you don't and you stay just on close-ups, you will lose track of where your characters are, and you don't want that to happen. So you want to be able to reorient the audience. So that's exactly what's going on here. Plus, it also allows to see for big action. In this case, Cora is sending these boulders towards him to hit him. So he turns around. This is all within frame. So he comes from smaller to bigger, which is dynamic, and the rock as well. So it's there's and these layers are not locked. They stay locked. There's no animated layer here. We're not animating the background or sliding the background. Also timing wise, I timed this out. you want to make sure that you have time for that to read that boulder coming at him. You can adjust your timing, obviously, and the faster you go, the faster that boulder is going to appear to come flying at him. So if you really want it to feel fast, you can adjust this. Maybe this stays here. And you get a sense that this is happening fairly fast. Even here, this probably needs to be adjusted. Yep. So, and the nice thing about Toon Boom is you can adjust these sliders to kind of move back and forth. So you can control this very easily, and you don't have to get hung up in how many frames it is. It's a feel for the board artist more than anything. Let the editors worry about the timing of it in the sense of actual frame count and footage, and the sheet timers. But if your job as the board artist is to give us the initial feel of everything. So, you know, focus far more on the timing than the actual, you know, frame count. So this part, this is where things get a little trickier. So I'm going to turn on the camera here so you can see. Now what I did, so we're tracking with him. So he avoids the boulder, and we want to make sure that it feels like he is now moving to the side, to his left, the screen left. So he dodges the first boulder. The second one, as you can see, is animating up towards him. And what I did is I used the camera tool, and I went here once I did this, and it will give you keyframes. And I created keyframes, and I placed them in the scene for where I wanted this movement to be. So you can see the camera actually adjusts over, and now it gives us time for this action to read as he animates to the left. And also it opens up some room for the reveal of Cora. So he dodges. And again, I adjusted my camera to track with him. And I did it so wherever he's moving, I wanted to give the sense that he was moving towards the left. And I also was widening my camera. So I was trucking out as this action is occurring to give it more scope and a sense of breathing space for the actions to read, because they're going further away. It's creating the illusion of depth that the character is animating away from camera, when it's really in camera. It's a camera move. So we're not actually animating the character going away in scale. We're widening the camera. So you can see all the keyframes that I have here for this. So the next one, again, it's from this, when he pushes off on the rock. And my green is my start. The red is the end. So he is starting in that position, and then he pushes off, and the camera, you can see it kind of widens. So that gives us our next move, where he leaps off of the rock. And you can see the green and the red, and that's the space created. So now he's pushing off, and you can see Cora animating really small. And as the camera trucks out, he begins to twist in midair. And again, start, end with the camera movement to allow that movement, his movement, to keep his body completely in frame. And this is a continuous camera move. It's going from, as you can see, from I put in a lot of keyframes and moved and readjusted the camera. So he's turned, the camera starts to adjust over to allow Cora to fly towards him. Here I kept the camera static, and just to allow for that moment, to allow the sense of movement that Cora is flying towards him. And then I started with my keyframes again as Cora quickly flies towards him. And you can see the blur panel on Cora to give her a sense of movement. A lot of times in action storyboards, not everything has to be, as a matter of fact, you do want that exaggeration of pose sometimes. It gives a life and a snap to the actual pose. And it's a trick that animators use, especially in anime, where you'll see these blurred lines, and it's to convey a sense of movement. And this isn't a very exaggerated pose. Sometimes the poses are actually look like arms are breaking, but it's only for a split second on the screen, maybe a couple of frames. So it barely registers in the audience's mind, except to give the pose more elasticity and snap. Some directors that I've worked with don't like it. Some studios, but a lot do. And Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles takes it to an extreme. But even in so-called straight animation, action animation, it's being used more and more, and it really does give a nice life to things. So it's something that I recommend doing if you can. All right, back to what we were talking about. So Cora comes flying towards him. Again, you can see the blue now is the end pose on this. It's the end camera, I should say. I'm sorry, the end camera. So when Cora comes, boom, she hits him, and you can see the camera move is tracking to allow for some space in here, to allow this movement to feel like there's more room, that there's room for them to fly off. So when they finally do, they go off camera. So all of this is used some of this maybe need to extend a little bit timing wise. A little too fast for some of these movements. So let's see. And keep in mind sometimes that Storyboard Pro chugs, has a little bit of lag. My suggestion when you're, if you want to see how a sequence is playing, go to export movie, and you can create a movie, and you can actually select the scenes. You can see where the scene, so this is scene, let's see here, so this is scene 3. So if you went here and you hit scene 3 and 4, maybe 3 and 4, just to get the pose or the feel, you can hit OK, and then you can hit export, and it'll create the movie. You can hit current scene, so it's on the scene that you have highlighted, and you can see how it feels and how it looks. So let's create this. Okay, let me drag this in here. Did I close it out? No, good. All right, so let's see how this feels. That feels, actually, it's not too bad. So you can see it's a little less chuggy when you do that. All right, so I'm going to leave that alone. But anyway, that's a pro tip. If you want to see how a scene is playing, you can actually, create a little film of it, and then you can kind of watch it in real time just to see how it feels. Because sometimes this will chug and has a lag to it when you're doing some of this. So it depends on how big your file is. Okay, so on to our next bit of information. The next thing that I'm going to show you, and this is probably, again, one of the bigger things that is done in action storyboarding, is creating an animated background. And you can use it for a variety of purposes. It's, in this case, it's used to create the illusion of movement through a background. So what I will do is, you can see there's perspective lines here just to kind of keep things honest. And here is the layer I wish to animate. Now what I can do, and I will have shown you the video on creating animated layers prior to this. But what I want to show is, if you click on that, now you have a running man. And so this, if in this is not an animated layer. You do that, it's now a layer that you can animate. So the reason why we use this is it's a nice little tool, and it gives, like I said, it gives a sense of movement throughout a scene. And you can scroll things up and down the way you want. So the trick here is, if you know you're going to create a moving background that's going to either grow or recede in the distance, you want to make sure that you create something that's bigger than the actual, what you're seeing on the screen. That way you have things going receding in the distance or coming bigger. In this case, this stuff is actually coming at camera. But I did want to just widen it out and extend the artwork so you could see what things look like. But if things were receding away from camera, you would want this. So let me show you. So here's the trick. So you go to the very beginning of the panel that you have. And when you click on this, it will bring all of this nice stuff up. What you can do is put a keyframe. And so once I put my keyframe in, let me show you what it does. So once that's the case, you can see actually two keyframes, which I don't want. I want to delete one of them off because I don't want two there. So now the keyframe is here. So if this is where you want your start pose to be for the background, that's great. If it isn't, you can adjust things. In this case, this is where I want it to be. So I'm going to, and the nice thing about Storyboard Pro, once you've created this animated layer and you're in it, you don't need to create a keyframe here. What you do, take it to where you want this to end. And I suggest giving yourself some room in the panel so you can split it or have the movement end if you want at a certain spot. And if that's one panel, if you're doing stuff within one panel, that way you can split the panel. You can actually come up here and split the current frame. And then you have a panel that has movement in it, but then you have a panel that doesn't. So that way your end position, wherever this ends. So let's say that I want it to end here. And let's say that, oops. Let's say that I want this to come to here, and we're going to slide it here. So, and then here, I can split that panel. So now what occurs is there's movement, but the movement ends here. So the background stops moving. Now I can time this. I can go whoop, and then I can keep my background. As you can see, I can do whatever I want. And that's if you're doing movement through one through one scene in one panel. In this case, however, we're not. We're going to extend this movement throughout several panels. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels. So I'm going to, and Command Z is your undo on this. It's your friend. So you set Command Z, and if you go into preferences and go to advanced, it'll give you level of undo. I set mine at 50. You can set it higher, but it really slows everything down. And also a very important thing is always set autosave, and I set mine at 10 minutes. 10 minutes isn't that much drawing time to lose stuff if something happens that, in between a save. But also it's not so long that you're losing a ton. And if you set it sooner, it gets really annoying. So, because it actually stops what you're doing, you have to wait for everything to save. As the files get bigger, the save takes longer. So I suggest setting it at 10 minutes for an autosave. All right. So anyway, level of undo, set it at 50. So here's the trick. I want to spread this layer motion through all of this stuff here. So I'm going to these out. I'm going to copy these layers, copy this layer, and what I'm going to paste this background in. So what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to delete this also, delete. So we don't want anything there now. Okay, so you start with a clean slate. So I'm going to copy the selected layer, which is labeled A. I'm going to press my shift key down and highlight all of these guys, all of the layers, all the panels that I want in my scene. I'm going to go up to layer, go to paste layer special, and you can see it brings this up. This is the panel name, which is A, and the panel destination, scene 4, panels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are those guys. I actually, I want to overwrite the existing layer with the same name, and I want to place layer at the bottom. And the reason why you want the layers to be the same name is for this reason. Let's see here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create movement in one panel, but I'm going to spread it across all of these to give the illusion of movement. So as Cora is flying along with him, oops, let's see here. So we're going to start here. I'm going to set my keyframe. I'm going to move it to the end of the frame. And I am going to adjust to where my end pose, where I want this to end in the movement. Now you can see this line. You see how this line is following. That's telling me the movement. It's telling you the movement. So, now if we just did this in one panel, it would go fairly quickly, and it also we would have to repeat the elements. Now you could do this throughout the scene if you wanted it to be like a Fred Flintstone kind of background, but we don't want that. So what we are going to do is come up to layer, and we are going to spread layer motion. So we're going to click on that, and I always highlight the next 4 panels. It actually gives you, if you don't want the movement in the same scene through every panel, you can highlight this. If you want it in every panel, you can highlight this. I don't know what it is with me. Maybe it's I'm superstitious, but I like clicking this, and it's this bottom one, and making sure it's all the way through the panels, but either one should work fine. I click OK, and now this layer of movement is spread throughout. Whoops, let me get up there, get back down there. All right, so, and it goes through all of that. And the other thing that's, you create within this, so you have movement that you've created, and you can now draw over top of that movement. And if you want, you could actually go in here and if you wanted to, you could split the frame. It would still keep the panel movement. And if you want to change his expression, maybe you could do that here. So, if you wanted him to, I don't know, to have, a more maniacal look on his face or something. Oops, my computer is lagging for a second here. There we go. Maybe he gets the idea that he's going to do this. So he's like, ha, ha, ha. And so you kind of have this. So now you can have that. You could change if you wanted to add more poses. You could do that all the way through. You can, again, you could extend if you wanted to slow this down. You could do so through this, expand, this would slow the background down. So if they're coming more to a crawl here at the end for some reason, you could really slow it down by doing that, by extending the bar. So that's creating an animated layer. And let's see, I did it here as well. So the characters are kind of flying up, and I created this to show a sense of movement here as well. So let's see here, I'm going to this here, but so there's my start and my end would be that goes off. So you have this moment here of that. Let's see here. So, and you just have that nice little beat that's here. So it's like, whoop, they go up, Corey gets shoved off, and she's going to animate down away from camera. So very quickly you can see it created a sense of movement by creating that animated layer. Right here. And the blue bounding box, that's what tells you. Yeah, you always want to hold shift down when you're moving these layers, because if you don't and you somehow grab it, it will distort, as you can see. And then that actually becomes a problem because you have like squashy, stretchy stuff going on. So you always have to be careful to hold shift. You always have your control undo, but hello everyone. All right, ready for part 2 of the core breakdown. In this breakdown, I want to show you the most common thing that we use primarily in action storyboarding for animation, and that is animating a layer, having a moving camera. It creates a very dynamic effect, and it looks complex, but it's really fairly simple. So anyway, let's get started with the breakdown. So as you can see here, I've created a background that's wider than the box itself, the frame, and that's because we're going to be creating an illusion of depth and camera movement. So we're going to start first things first. I am going to start with the actual creating movement within the panel by creating an animated layer. So I want to make sure I have everything that I need, and I do. Get rid of whatever layers I don't need. Yeah, can't do that yet. Never mind. Let's see. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do, I'm going to highlight this background first. We're going to create this in different layers to create a little even more illusion of depth. So we're going to have a background and a middle ground, which are these, and we're going to have our heroine animate towards these rocks. So this is the continuation of this scene where Cora is pushed away and off camera. You can see how wide the shot is, and you can see when we come here, she's fairly large in frame, and that gives us an illusion of you know, it's an illusion of depth, but it's also creating contrast in the scene. Okay, so first things first, let's get these guys moving. So we're going to create an animated layer. So what I'm going to do is go to my beginning of my panel, and I'm going to select this, which is our animated layer box, and we're going to add a keyframe. And we're going to, okay, so we have that, that's the beginning. And now we're going to save some space here to cut. And I'm going to set it at this line so I know where to stop. So now the nice thing about, usually about the animated layer is once I kind of do this, I will have created a sense of, it will create the keyframe for me. So I have one keyframe, two keyframes there. So, okay, that's my background. All right, so it looks like it's moving in. And I'm going to now create a second background here. So we're going to start there, and we are going to end here. Oops. Let's see here. What did I do wrong? Okay. So I don't have a start keyframe. That would help. Very important. We're going to end here. So when I drag this guy, I will be creating a sense of movement. All right. Now the reason why I save space here is very important. You can see once I did this, that this area is, that's where we've ended up. And I want to split the panel here, and I'll show you why in a little bit, but it's very important that you do that, that you create that end frame and split it so you have some wiggle room in case you want, for what we're doing, what we're going to do, which is using camera movement. So in this very panel now, we are going to start slightly with this camera move. I'm going to split my panel, my frame. I'm going to to split it again here. I am going to now add Cora. So, and here, we'll split it again. I will add my second panel, Cora. I will split my panel again. My third. And here, I'll add my last panel of Cora as this mountain peak is gaining. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend some of this artwork. I am going to split the panel again here. And we are going to have impact. And we don't want her to animate, so I'm going to select her over a little bit here. Just a slight adjust. But you can see already the movement within the frame. And this is why I have given myself the space. So once she hits, the panel becomes, I want the panel to kind of, the movement to stop because it's impact. So I would even argue that maybe instead of the movement being here, I actually think I'm going to not split this panel. It's okay. And I think I'm actually going to have the impact when it's not moving. I think it'll be greater. Let's see here. So we'll split the panel here. And her impact is here. Let's see, I'm going to move this a little bit. Okay, so bam, she hits. And we're going to add, split the panel again. And let's see, we got a couple of panels here. Panel again for her to fly up. Now the artwork, I'm creating all of this smaller, but you're going to see what's going to happen in a second. And then finally, our last panel is this. All right. So let's see. So you can see, oops, I have a sense of Cora. Everything's moving. But what I want to have happen is the camera is going to start to follow Cora when she enters. It's already created keyframes, which I don't want. So let's see. Okay. So I'm going to create, I'm going to go to my, to the camera move tool. I'm going to create a keyframe here. And as she kind of goes through, like as we get closer, I'm going to add a panel here. Let's see here. So we're going to start to truck in and adjust with her. She's kind of in a way. So let's see how this looks. Yep, you can see there's a sense of movement here with this. So it actually flows pretty well. It'll give us 10 minutes or so here to save. Okay. So I'm going to create another keyframe here. The camera continues to move in on her. So this may actually be where we want this to end. So, yep, so here's probably my end pose right here, the end point for this. Now with this action, I want to track up with Cora as she starts to move and bounce off of this rock. So I'm going to create a new key. Oops. Actually, you always want to use this keyframe. All right. So let's see here. We're going to track with her now as she okay, and always have to let it play to get a sense of how it's going to pose out. And then we're going to end on this beat, which is tracking up with Cora. And she leaps up into the air. A little bit of twist here. And also always leave room so you can split your panel if you want, in case you want to continue action. So now you can adjust. The nice thing about this is if you want, again, it's speed wise. It's all figuring out how you want things to feel. If you want this to play faster or slower, you adjust your timing. So you can make the impact feel greater or harder by maybe speeding it up a little bit. And then if you want this action to read a little more, you can play with it. And if you don't like your camera, you can always readjust and move by selecting your frame. It'll highlight it. It'll give you, it'll tell you where you are in here. So if I hit this, you can see that the green box highlights itself. Or if this is too much of a camera move and it feels too extreme, you can always adjust things in camera that way. So maybe it doesn't feel as big. Same thing here. Maybe you don't want that as much. And then it doesn't feel as extreme. But the bigger your camera movement, the more extreme it's going to feel one way or the other. If you make it smaller, it's going to feel more, it's going to feel impactful. The smaller, bigger you make it. So it depends on how hard you want the impact to feel. or punch or anything. And like I said, you can always speed things up. And I always leave this space for myself just in case you want to, you know, if you wanted to change, you know, Cora's pose. You wanted her to, you know, maybe there's a quick beat in here where she changes her pose a little bit, you know, starts to turn or twist or something of that nature. Smoke, you know, if you want the smoke to kind of dissipate off of her, you know, those kinds of things you can do. But if you don't give yourself any room to do that with, then you're in trouble. So it's then you have to, what you would simply do is you'd have to create another panel. So let's say that I messed up and I wanted that. I didn't have this panel and I wanted to add something. I can always come up here, go down to copy and layer position to start. And it's the same with these guys. You highlight whatever's moving, copy end position to start, and it locks itself in place. So now if I create more panels, they don't move. So it's two ways of doing it. It's either way, you're okay, one way or the other. So, but I just like to save myself some room, but whatever works best for you. So it works fine. And again, you can, let's see here. So you can always go to this and create for yourself a little movie just to see. And I've selected all of these panels, so selected scenes. So I am going to go to current scene. Let's see here. Yes, I will overwrite. Oh, we'll see how this plays. But that's pretty much how we do moving backgrounds along with moving camera. And, you know, and there's finessing that goes on for sure. You know, so you have to sit down and play with it to get it to how you want it to feel and play. But it is the most common tool that we have. Okay, so let's see. I'll drag this in real quick. Yeah, I mean, it works fairly well. So hopefully that's of help, and that is how you do that. All right, hopefully that was helpful. So those are pretty much you know, that's a fairly comprehensive dive into what we do for, you know, and that's stuff that you can use in your boards. I tried to cover most of the major stuff there. You know, you create movement with very little drawing. And those tools, I mean, the tutorial took a long time, but honestly, in application, it wouldn't take you that long at all to do. And that's how we do, you know, that's how we do all of this stuff as professionals. Those are the working tools that we have. I'm going to show you a lot more, but that's one of them. So here's the other one. So I want to show you SketchUp, and let me click on this and get this opened up. Does anybody have any questions while I'm waiting to open up this program? Anybody have anything that they weren't sure of, or they were confused by, or did it seem to answer most of the questions for you?
I think most things were answered, at least for myself. I'll definitely be rewatching that or not yesterday, tomorrow. And when definitely tired right now. But also I may have more questions, and if maybe other people will too, once we as we start this week storyboarding
Yeah.
out the scene. I think then I'll have, and other people may, more practical questions.
Yep, I'm sure you will. So it's always I have a lot of videos and a lot of stuff that I've made, and I'm going to continue for this class. I'm making more and more as I go, to break things down. And I have, some workflow videos. I know I showed some of you in the storyboarding class, some of them, but I think I will show them to you again next week. Tonight, what I want to show you, one final thing, is I sent you SketchUp, and I believe maybe I didn't put the grid in there, and I'll throw it in there. But I'm going to show you how to use SketchUp. So SketchUp is a free application that you can download. Google used to be the company that made it, but they sold it to a company called Trimble. Now, I have no idea who's Trimble's owned by. It's probably Microsoft or somebody. I don't know. I have no idea. It's a tool that was created for engineers, and basically you can build anything three-dimensionally in SketchUp, and you can kind of see, just even from this little box right here. But anyway, there's a free. You want SketchUp free. You don't want the Pro trial, just a free. SketchUp free. And if it doesn't allow you, sometimes I know with SketchUp, one of the things that that SketchUp had done was, I think you have to click on the free Pro trial now, but it doesn't obligate you. You don't have to put a credit card in or anything. And after 30 days, it runs out, and then you can just use the free trial. So, or the free SketchUp free. Can everybody see SketchUp? Can you see it open up on here? Yeah. Okay. So we don't want this. Actually, what I had done, you can go in and you can Google and go to SketchUp Warehouse, 3D Warehouse. And let me see here if I can. So let me stop this for 1 second, and I will show you. Let's see here. Let me just pull up Google SketchUp or Google Warehouse. So if you just go to Google and type in SketchUp Warehouse. My computer, I'm sorry, I have to, I'm actually getting a new hard drive for my computer. My computer has too much crap on it. I was busy all day yesterday deleting a bunch of stuff off, and it took quite a while. All right, SketchUp Warehouse. So if let me see here. Where is it here? All right, here we go. Okay, so I go here and I go to SketchUp Warehouse, and I hit SketchUp Warehouse. There's a 3D warehouse that comes up. You have to be signed in, but you can just use your Gmail or whatever your email is, and you can just sign up for it. I'm already signed up on here, but let's say I want to look at, I don't know, let's say a truck. I can go in here, hit truck, and you can see they give you, there's a ton of options for trucks, right? So let's say I like this truck. I download it. Oops, I need to be signed in. So I actually am not signed into this. All right, well, I'm not going to sign in right now, but what I will do, oops, let's see here. Maybe I can't sign in real quick. All right. All right, now I am signed in. Okay, so let's see here. So let me do that, and It's probably just as easy to show you without opening it up. I am going to do that. So I actually, let's see here. So in SketchUp, here's something I already had downloaded. This is for a job I was doing. So this is a hacienda. You can find anything. So the job I'm working on actually is requiring it's a hacienda. So this is basically what SketchUp will give you. It'll open the file up like this. So you'll get it and it's like, oh, and you can use these tools and you can rotate around, come in, come out. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can rotate it on an axis and move it up and down.
Frozen?
What's that?
I think it might have frozen. I can't see you doing anything to the file. I can't even see a file.
Oh, hold on a second. I have the wrong screen up. Let me do this. Sorry, Abby. Thanks for saying that. All right.
You are good.
All right. No, I'm not. If I was good, I would have had it on the right screen. Okay, can you see it now? So this is the hacienda, right? That I wanted. So you can see I can zoom in, I can zoom out. I can go to depth of field of view, and I can actually make things have some depth of field. And that, while this looks really cool and really great, I can do all kinds of go inside. You can see they build like all of these things, right? Here's like one of the neat things you can do. So I can go to if you go up to, you can't really see it here on the SketchUp. Let me stop the share again. Let me do this. Show you my whole desktop. So, all right. So now, if I go, can everybody see the whole up here with? So can you see where it says where I'm going up here and it says tools, right? Or no, window. I'm sorry, window. So if I come down here and I can do this, let me bring this in here. So you see, everybody see this little window, this thing that popped up over here? Okay. So now what I can do is I can go to styles, hit styles, and let's see here. Oops. There we go. So it brings up a whole mess of different, you see all these little boxes here, right? So watch what it does if I select, I can go here and I can select this thing that says sketchy edges. And if I go here, boop, all of a sudden it looks like pen and ink drawings. And not only that, but this little box here creates a shadow. Everything that you need is right here in the windows. So you can go to, you can actually put fog on it if you want. You can put all of these different things. This is the basics of what I use it for. You can have layers. You can put layers in here. It's a really versatile tool. But so anyway, I can create shadows on here, and I can create shadows from any day of the week, any time of day or night. So 365 days a year. So I can choose to use put shadow on the ground. I can choose not to put shadow on the ground. I can choose it from the edges. I can do all kinds of stuff. And it looks like it looks like a drawing. It doesn't look, doesn't have that plasticky kind of three-dimensional kind of CG look. It actually looks like you drew it. So the other thing you can do, I actually imported this fountain in. It wasn't here. I actually pulled up another SketchUp file with a fountain because that was what my the background required for the job I'm doing, and I just plopped it right in. And you can import that. You can import, anything. If I wanted cars in here, or if I wanted, a wagon, or whatever they have a SketchUp model for, you can import and bring it into your model, and then you can create it and it's really easy to do. You just drop it, just come and plop it right in. And so that's one of the things you can do. The other thing you can do is you can create scenes. So if I go back, let's see here, you can see going back to that. So here's a scene that I created. So if I created a few scenes. So if I toggle between them, it will actually, oops, that was a little too extreme. Let's see here. Let me try this one. So if I do that, let me get rid of this box here. And if I hit scene 6, you can see it literally animates. And it would be nice if you could just use this, right? And just use that animation because it's nice and smooth. Well, the good news is you can. So you can import, actually export. You can export it as animation. And you can either create an MP4, you can create them as separate PNG files, as JPEGs. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. So if you want to create a little movie, you could do that. If you want to create JPEGs, you could do that. PNG files. If you wanted, if you wanted to create them individually, it's set at 24 frames a second, I believe, is what I have here with my options. Yes. And I think that's a default, and it won't let me click out of it for some reason. So literally, this is probably about a couple seconds worth of animations. It's probably about 48 frame. It'll give me 48 separate drawings. So if you really wanted to, you could, import it into or export it to like a separate folder. And if you really wanted to go 48 frames across, you could. Or you can create a movie and you can drag. I'll show you how to drag and drop movies next week into Toon Boom. It's pretty easy. And you could do it that way, and you could just draw over top of the animation. Or what you can do is kind of what a lot of us do. And you can, you could just go kind of frame by frame with it, and just kind of, and after you create your movie, actually, you can create a movie with it and then go frame by frame and just screen grab what you need and plop it in. You could do that too. So there's a lot of different options that you have with this. But it's a fairly versatile tool. I use it for a lot of different things. You can, if you can think of it, it's probably in the SketchUp warehouse. It's probably, there's probably a, if you want a sword, or if you want the Batmobile, or many different things, you can pull them up and find them. They're pretty readily available. So I think it's a great tool. I highly recommend using it. I sent you, some of these SketchUp files to use. Let's see here. So, there's all kinds of, oh, here we go. There's actually a grid, and this is what I use for my perspective grid. Now, Toon Boom actually has perspective lines that you can work off of, which work fine. I like this because it's a little more dynamic to me. It's, I can, so what I do is I just find when the type of angle that I'm looking for a lot of times, and I'm like, that's close enough, screen grab it and then drop it in, and then just use it as an underlayer, and there's my perspective grid. So it's, I really love this tool. I think it's really great, and I try to use it everywhere I can, as much as I can. And there's other ones. There's one called FBX. There's, which is another, but it's a very, cheap version. And I'm not a big fan of FBX files, but some jobs you get, they work in FBX. And they're just basically, they're just a Maya. They're built in Maya, and then it's basically an FBX is like a cheap. It's a way for people to look at things just very quickly. There's very little detail in them, but we get a lot of backgrounds that are that way because it's fast and cheap. But like I said, I prefer using SketchUp if I can for the things that I do. So, all right, and there's that. Does anybody have any questions about SketchUp? No?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how do we use it in tandem with Storyboard Pro?
Well, you have to create, you export the whatever it is. Like, you know, if I wanted to, I could. And let me show you. Like, let me see here. Actually, it's really easy. Storyboard Pro is fantastic for this. Storyboard Pro 7. You can literally export. So you can go to. Let's see here. All right. So I can go here, right, to up here, and then I can export whatever it is that I want. So let's say that this is an image that I want, and I can just save that grid, and I can export it, and I, you know, have it to where I want to export it in my documents folder. And let's see, let me open up Storyboard Pro. Sorry, like I said, I need to upgrade my hard drive. It's coming next week. It should be nice and fast. Okay, so let me see here. Let me find, there it is. Plus I have tons of shit on my computer. All right, so let me just open up. Let's see here, just something that, so just open this up. It should open up quickly. As I say that. And let's see here, put up my docs, okay. Man, there we go. Okay, so let's see here. All right. So let's stop the share here. And I will here. All right. So in Storyboard Pro, what I'll do is I will take, let's see here, stop the share again and show my desktop. Okay. So I have my doc folder open. And let's just say that I created a PNG of this image. I exported from the Hacienda and I want to put it in. All I do is just drag and drop and boop, there it is. So it's that simple. So once you export the image that you have in Storyboard Pro, you can just drag and drop it into your project, whatever it is that you're doing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really cool that you can just drag and drop it in there. That's neat.
Yep. Well, that's only Storyboard Pro 7. If you're on an earlier version of it, you have to, it's not that big of a deal, but you have to go and import it in from your, you know, from your from the project, you know, you can't just drag and drop it. You have to import it in. But it's I highly recommend, if you're going to get Storyboard Pro, you know, get Storyboard Pro 7. I think you can only, I don't even know if you can get the older versions of it. But you know, it has that feature alone will save you a ton of time, because you can do that for anything. You can drag and drop, which is great, you know, with JPEGs. And I don't know if you can drag and drop Photoshop files, because you should be able to, but I'm not sure, 100% sure. I've never tried. But anyway, it's you know, it's to me, this is the easiest and fastest thing, the way to have backgrounds without, going through a lot of trouble of drawing them. And also what I find in using SketchUp, especially if you have models that are, you find something that you can use, is it creates, when you're kind of moving your camera around, it creates really interesting angles that you might not, that you weren't going to think of your own. And you're like, oh, it's a great angle, I can plop that in. And, you can animate, like I showed you, you can animate stuff by creating the scenes and having things come and go away from camera, slide, anything you want. You can just pick 2 points in Storyboard Pro. One could be a high angle, and then you can pick a really low angle on something and create one scene in the high angle and then one scene in a low, and it will fill in the blanks for you, and it'll create a moving camera. And you can use it to create a movie and plop it, like I said, and just screen grab stuff and drop it in, or however you want to do it. So it's a really, really versatile tool. I really like it quite a bit. And like I said, I highly recommend it, using it. And it's in the Google Drive. If you download SketchUp, get the current version of it, and it's free, and you'll be able to use those files, and you can use it for, for the Justice League board. And that's exactly what we get when we're getting handouts, especially at the studios like Warner Brothers, and they're really good. Warner's usually creates all of their backgrounds in SketchUp. Some studios don't, but Warner's does, and some of the other studios. And if you're working on a project and you're working, I worked on just came off of a show for Netflix, and they were fine with me using backgrounds, from SketchUp Warehouse. I used cars. I had a whole big chase sequence that I did with a car, and I was pulling in the models from SketchUp, and basically it looked like animation. So you can do a multitude of things and save yourself a lot of time and effort. Literally, it took me maybe a half an hour to do this elaborate car chase, and if I had to draw it all, it would have taken me a week. So it's a huge time saver. And it's all about what saves you time as a storyboard artist, because what we're doing is art. Art is commerce. We're doing art we're making stuff on a deadline. So the faster you can get it done, and the nicer it looks, and it's all about clarity. All of that is done for you in SketchUp. So, all right, there's that. So anybody want to talk about Justice League? Do we want to discuss this tonight? Everybody's starting their sequences. You know what you're going to work on, right? Yes? Yeah.
Yeah, my question was, so like how clean do you want the boards to be? Or to be like the final versions?
It's not how clean I want them to be. It's how clean you want them to be. These are things that I think, the hope here is that you make something for your portfolio, that you can use. What I would tell you is I would rather see a rough action sequence, and then we're going to critique and go through stuff anyway when we're doing this. So, I would like it to be is the action plays really well. And, if we can't get to a final clean version, that's something you can always take and work on as you're doing stuff. But I think it's more important that the action really reads and is really nice and fun and good. So you have something that's a really great little action set piece that you can put in your portfolio. Make sense? Okay. So, we're going to focus on things like, we want to make sure that we have we have a lot of, whatever. With this board, what I want you to do is I want you to do action, but in a way that you feel comfortable. And also, if you want to push yourself a little bit, We're going to talk about foreshortening next week a little bit. We're going to talk about dynamicism of angles. And, you've already seen those examples that I showed, because there's varying degrees. Different shows have different needs and wants of the boards and what it is. Some shows are more kid friendly and don't want extreme action. They want action, but it's not crazy. Some shows are like anything goes, and it's big and it's over the top. And, we're going to go through, I'm going to break down some stuff from Glicktex, if you've ever seen that on Netflix. It's a fairly intense show. There's a sequence that I broke down. It's a very easy, simple sequence, but it looks really dynamic and really cool. But it's something that you could board and do in 5 minutes. So anyway, these are all, it's all learning these tricks and then applying them and putting into the work that you're doing. What I'd like to do is, that everybody ends up with some action that they think is really good in their for their portfolio. And I want to focus on structure a little bit. Like, this is a little different than the class that I teach normally for storyboarding. In the case of action, depending, what you probably should be focused on is what type of show do you want to work on? If you're working on an action show, what kind of show do you want to work on? Do you want to work on a Stretch Armstrong? Do you want to work on the Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Because there's a big difference between the two. Do you want to work on Adventure Time? There's a difference between that. And it's not just the drawings, but the drawings play a big part of that. It's how dynamic your angles are. Structurally, they're always looking for well-drawn, well-constructed boards and well-drawn figures. So, I do want to focus a little bit on the structure of these things. And I always say that in my storyboarding classes that the drawing doesn't matter. The drawing matters here a little bit. So that's, I want to focus on clarity, dynamicism, and how things move and how they seem to have a sense of flow to them. So, those are the things that I want you to focus on, and specific to the type of show that you want to do, that you want to get your portfolio geared towards. Do you want it to feel a little less dynamic? Maybe your sensibilities, whatever your sensibilities are and your strengths in the show, the type of show you want to work on, then that's what we'll do. And we'll work on it. We'll talk about it. So, and next week, what I'd like to do is start getting some thumbnails in here so we can start to kind of pitch them a little bit and talk about stuff. Does everybody feel comfortable doing any of that, or you feel like it's...
Yeah. Yeah, I feel good. I have a question though.
Yeah.
Can Wonder Woman fly now?
Yeah, you can have her fly. Sure.
Okay, just because in the script, constantly she's flying or hovering and stuff. So
That threw me too, because she doesn't traditionally fly like Superman does.
Well, if it's a script that you get, Abby, and that she flies in the script and they're paying you, and then she flies. So in Justice League Action, they had her flying, and it seems like, she has a jet, which, it's like kind of redundant that she needs a jet. I would say she probably can't fly as much as Superman. She probably can kind of hover and then kind of have to land maybe, but it's for the sake of this, she could fly. And, so I would just kind of, do, have her flying. I'm seeing some of the questions here. The thumbnails, I would prefer you start plopping them into Storyboard Pro, and so we can kind of talk about it that way. I don't expect them to be completely fleshed out and done, but I think you should have a pretty good jump on what you can do. What's there. So what you get is what you get. And like I said, everybody works different pace in different ways. So, but the ultimate result here is to get them into Storyboard Pro and have them, so if you work pencil and paper, just like we were talking, and you scan them and you cut and paste, and they can be rough. As long as we can kind of tell what's going on, that's great. because these are thumbnails. I don't want you to be precious with them. I want you to have fun with them and push yourselves and say, hey, so, that's kind of get some, let's think about some dynamic, or let's think about, how you want it to, how you want it to come across, how you want some of the action. And we'll talk about it when we critique. We'll talk about pushing things and, maybe what we can do with some background elements, make things move and do all that kind of stuff. So we'll start, but the first step has to be the thumbnails. So
I actually have a question too. I'm always getting different opinions on this when it comes to putting licensed characters on your portfolio if you haven't worked on the show. And so I was like kind of wondering what your take is on that. Because some people are like, no, replace the characters, or it's
no,
fine.
Alicia, I mean, it's fine. And what really the big no-nos for showing stuff in a portfolio is if you show somebody else's work and you claim it's yours. So if you took my stuff and you were like, hey, I did this board for, Justice League, and, but look, I mean, what are you supposed to do? No, ignore that. That's really dumb advice. It's fine.
Okay.
It's not like here's the real tricky thing. The real tricky thing would be if I gave you a script for a show that hadn't come out yet, and you did it, and it was a licensed thing, that I could get in trouble. It wouldn't be your fault, but you could get in trouble too, in the sense, because it's material that hasn't been released yet. In the case of these shows are long aired, so they're 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, so they're fine. So that's where you get in trouble. That's where people, like, I have a bunch of stuff. It's called NDAs, non-disclosure agreement. I can't show, like, I would love to show some of the stuff that I worked on Netflix, but it's confidential, and I signed an agreement. I could get sued, for showing it, even in class, some of the stuff. So those are the things you can get in trouble for, but not, an existing old script that you can find and, and do stuff with. So don't worry about it. It's all good. You're fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So, and as I say that now to Alicia, like, she'll take it out and it'll be like, how dare you use, no, I'm kidding. It won't happen. Don't worry. You're fine. Actually, my friend Alan Wan, who is the showrunner on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he teaches a class at the Pasadena School of Art and Art Center, and they use like Justice League stuff, and they use whatever, it's part of the class. It's like, how are you going to teach how to do this stuff unless you actually have actual working materials to work with? So, I wish I could write a whole script, design all the characters and backgrounds, and then give it to you as a test. It's just not. You're not going to get that. So it's all good. All good. Anybody else?
What do you recommend as far as, so I notice where my mind goes, though I also, I see the wisdom of wanting to like curate your storyboard for whatever, brings you more joy to draw. But I wonder if there's any recommendations you have when it comes to CG material, because it seems like most shows are CG or are leaning towards CG. Granted, I don't know what the numbers are.
Well, not really. I mean, most shows, actually, CG is still very expensive, and
okay.
Yeah, no, not a lot of them do fall into that, actually.
Okay.
2D is still the cheapest way to do these things. Sometimes we'll have an animated background, but most of the time it's just, it's not. And we'll have, like, in the case of the car chase, like the cars are going to be CG animated, and there might be a CG background that they'll use, but it's all 2D for the most part, everything else. So that's how so don't worry about that part of it, Catherine. And if you want to do the board as CG, that's fine, because that's a discussion we can have. Like, you can do tracking shots. Then when you're working on something that's CG, it is more cinematic, because you have but there's also limitations in doing CG as well. Like when I worked on How to Train Your Dragon, I worked on the TV show, and it was the first season, and one of the directors wanted to treat it like the film. So he was like, every shot we had like scenes where they were literally in like a cafeteria, this Viking cafeteria, and he asked me to do this elaborate tracking shot, basically of them eating lunch. So I did. Everybody loved it. It was like, oh, it was great. And then about a month later, we had a big meeting where the producers came in, and they said, like they used my sequence. They were like, don't do this. They were like, well, it wasn't my fault. The reason why, it wasn't they were saying it was bad. Actually, the guy was like, oh, it's a really beautiful shot. He's like, we don't have we don't have enough computers to render all of this crap. So his literally what he said to us, and this still applies today, even with faster processors. That was 10 years ago. But even now, it's about render times. It's about how much time it takes, the asset. He said, treat it like a 2D show, like really put it, even though you can do these things, treat it like a 2D show in the sense that put your money where your mouth is, like use it sparingly for big tracking shots. So I had I had this dragon race that we had to do, and it was this big thing, and I did it, treated it like the Indianapolis 500. I actually pulled up reference from like YouTube of cars racing. It was Le Mans. It was the French, because they were going. So and it was great because I had all these dynamic, so I treated the dragons like race cars, and I had all these animated moving backgrounds because they were flying through all these like cliffs and all these different things. But that's where you're supposed to use it, and that made sense. And I actually thought it made doing a tracking shot is really tedious because it's kind of a boring shot. And there's so many moving pieces in it of like going through a cafeteria that it was just tedious and boring to draw. Whereas the dragon chase was exciting and fun. I had a great time doing that. So even like the mentality of like doing that work, it was the stuff that's fun, like you could belt out usually, but the stuff that's more tedious, why put yourself through that unless you're asked to do it, which I would have never done that shot the way that I did it if I wasn't told to. I was asked by the director to do it that way, so I did. I hated drawing it, hated working doing it. I had a SketchUp background, like we had SketchUp assets, so I did it. I just hated it because it just was a lot of work. And then it sucked because it was all thrown out. We had to redo it all. And I didn't board it, but they boarded it pretty much the way I would have probably boarded it had I done it. So normally. So anyway, but there's just different mentalities that go into a mindset that goes into doing something CG. But by all means, if you want to tailor your board for doing it, for a CG show, that's fine. Figure out, because you're doing an action sequence. So if you want it to feel CG and feel big and moving and tracking and everything, maybe we're tracking with Wonder Woman or something, she's flying. That's great. Like, go for it. Like, this is where you should be dynamic. Like in my storyboarding, there's the other storyboarding class, you're not going to get a chance to do, this kind of stuff. We're talking about other things. We're talking about setting the sequence up and setting everything. Yeah. This is like the big fun stuff. It's like, okay, let's have fun and let's make this really cool for the audience. So have a good time. Make it as big and ballsy as you want to make it, and fun.
Okay.
And that goes for everybody. Everybody. This is why we're all here, right? So it's like, let's make this ballsy, fun. Think about it in terms of the characters, like what Brandon talked about, what Brad talked about last week. Make sure that the characters feel authentic. Like, make sure that Wonder Woman, you're treating Wonder Woman in a different manner than you're treating Batman. They shouldn't all feel like the same character in the scene. Each one of them does something specific to them and has their own body language, those are the things to pay attention to. Their powers separate them. So it's like all of these things separate them from being, they make them unique. And that's what we should be doing in this, making them feel as unique as possible in these action sequences. Because that's what they're going to look for. They're going to look for, when they're looking at your storyboards and deciding whether they want to hire you for an action show, they're going to see how how well you do action, how dynamic it is. Does it fit what they do in their show?
Yeah.
B, they're going to look at how you treat the characters. Are you giving them character, defining character through action? Because that's important. Every show has it. You know, everybody wants, these producers want their characters served to the audience because there's toys that come involved in it. So you want these characters to really shine and stand out through their action. You want every kid to go, I want to be Wonder Woman, I want to be Superman, I want to be Batman. And you know, that's how you define them, is by doing that. So if they just all feel generic and it's not fun, then you know, then you're not doing your job.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you for breaking it down.
Yeah. So, you know, so let's see. Somebody had a question. What was the yes, we're going to share, Jason. I want to share them Storyboard Pro. So screen share next week. And, you know, you can walk me through the board, you know, you can walk us through the board, and then we'll talk about breaking things down. And, you know, and we'll give next week, we'll probably do, you know, an overview, but we will talk about hey, you can do this or you can do that. So I'll have my Storyboard Pro set up, and I can hopefully break something down fast for you and say hey, let's, you know, maybe you could try this, or you could break it. Here's how you might want to do that. So, you know, this may take, you know, it'll take all class for sure. I'm sure, to get through. So, and we'll try to keep everything, you know, fairly quick next week with our pitches. I don't want to treat this so much like if you're in my class and you've taken my storyboarding class, I don't want to treat this like we're looking at it and saying, oh, you know, maybe if you add, you know, we could, you know, do this or do this emotional beat or something. I'm more how do we get this action? How do we make it cool? And how do we make it work for you? So that's kind of where we're going to be going with this. And that's the mentality I want to take into the pitches. When you're looking at something, you could be hey, you know, it'd be cool if you did this. And then if we kind of come on to something and you're I want to do that, and you're not sure of how, then we can maybe break it down. And either I'll have a video, or, you know, we can break it down and talk about it. So
I have a question.
That way. Yeah.
Just, I'm pretty sure you're going to say yes, but just so that way, just to make sure, I can edit as if it was from Paprika or Perfect Blue, right? I can do anything I want.
You can do anything you want, Haley. You can do anything you want.
Thank you.
So, yep. This is your project. This is your action project. The only thing that I'm here for is to help you make it better, and, you know, and how to bring it, you know, as much to life as we possibly can. So, you know, what is that thing? I don't make the coffee. I just make the thing that makes it taste better, whatever, you know, think of me that way. So, you know, and everybody here, I don't want to get hung up next week on pitching, because that takes way too long. I don't want it, let's put it this way. I don't want a million, you know, if we have some thoughts, let's put them in, but let's try to keep it as simple as possible so we can get through everybody. So we can get everybody going, and, you know, so, you know, and if you have a really great idea and you want to help, that's great. But even be you know, even the things of oh, that's really cool, that's awesome. Let's limit that. Let's get the business. Let's talk about it. If that's literally treat this like a real work environment. Look at it clinically. Does it work? Is it fun? How can we make it better? And you know, if you have ideas or whatever, and we'll go from it that way. We'll approach it that way. So, and then also I do have some more videos I want to show, but we'll see how far we get in the pitch to next week. I can always use them the next week and we can show them. But anyway, that's it. So are there any questions? Anything else? We have Discord too. You guys can ask, you know, pop questions up. I see that from time to time. So if there's anything, you know, I'll jump on if there's, you know, if I can answer, if there's any major questions. As you know, I record this, so you don't have to worry about taking notes for the chorus stuff. You'll have it. When I send you the link, you'll have the, you know, the video, so you can go back and reference that and look at that. I do highly recommend that you think about moving a camera, moving backgrounds, things of that nature through your action stuff. I also, next week, I will show you, probably the first thing I'll show you is the thing from Glictex, because it's actually a character like running, and there's some nice dynamicism, and it's very simple to do, and it's only like an A-B pose. And literally the only thing that changed were the character's legs, and they put some squash and stretch, a settle and landing. And it looks, because they have sliding elements and a ground plane, it looks like there's a lot of movement, a lot of stuff going on, and there really isn't. It's very, but it's great. It's like that kind of stuff is the things, to me, it's like, how do you make something look great with the least amount of work possible? So, and, look awesome, because there's a lot of other work that goes in it. But anyway, look at the video again when I send it to you, break it down, analyze it, really try it in Storyboard Pro, practice a little bit, try to get some of this stuff and incorporate it into what it is that you're doing. And I think you'll see you'll find it very useful. And I think you'll be like, hey, this is great. So, because those are the biggies. The ones I showed you tonight are some of the biggest things. Understanding how to animate layers, how to use moving camera, and then to do them combined. That's pretty much almost everything major that you need to know for doing this stuff. Those are all the big ones, and that's the ones that a lot of people don't understand and get hung up on. And it's the big thing that Storyboard Pro does really, really well. So, all right. So anyway, any other thoughts?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
What would be the things that we need to avoid at all costs when doing action boards, like big mistakes that you see people doing?
I mean, in turn, like not being dynamic enough, not being too timid with the action. That's probably the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to be, to push yourself, and don't be afraid of being dynamic. Look at a lot of reference, like look at stuff that you want it to be. Like if you want it to look like Cowboy Bebop, and have a Cowboy Bebop feel, then look at Cowboy Bebop and study it and break it down. Do screen grabs, use some of that stuff as like your basis for your composition. And, click and drag and drop some of the screen grabs and use that as like a template for what you're doing to get that look. And then go from there and then flesh things out and fill things in, but study and look at the things that you want to do. Those are the authenticity and tepid action are the biggest killers. Like if I can't tell you how many, and also understanding what it is that the show that you want to do. Like I said, if you want to do Cowboy Bebop, then really look at Cowboy Bebop and analyze it and break it down. How do they do this? What types of shots do they do? How do they compose them? How do they juxtapose it? With the action, how is everything moving when they have a big action set piece? Like how does it move and flow? Look at things that you like and you want this to be. If it's Fully Cooley, but fine, look at Fully Cooley. If it's Evangelion, look at it Evangelion. If it looks like James Bond, watch, James Bond. Whatever it is, analyze it and study it, and then start breaking down your board that way and thumbnailing it that way.
Thank you.
All right. So anything else?
Was there a Minerva, what do you call it?
Athena. There's Athena. She's in there. Is there another one?
Is.
Yeah, I sent you guys an email with the characters. Like it's not, she's not late. Like this is I sent you what I want you to use for Athena, for the Hive Commander and the Dock Workers. Like I pulled 4 models of stuff and to use. So John, if you don't have them, if you didn't get them, you want me to resend it?
Oh no, I saw them, but I didn't think they were labeled. They were labeled.
Oh, I just assumed. Yes, they are. They're different names. Like they aren't Athena, and they aren't, but they are. That's who I want you to use. So I just assumed everybody would kind of figure out that the woman was Athena, that the Hive Commander was like the monster, and the Dock Workers were the, So
okay.
I didn't label it, but that's if anybody's confused, that's what I want you to use. So.
All right. Nice. And then she has a costume change at one point.
She has like armor that she puts on. If you have it in your scene, just make something. You know, this is what we get most of the time. We'll get a model. Usually, the best case, you do get the costume change, but most times you don't, and you just kind of, they're like, hey, make something up and kind of put it on. The director may tell you, you're the director, so you make whatever you feel. If you find something that works, you make it work. You know, make it really, you know, work for her. So
All right.
I wouldn't go overboard though, John. Like I wouldn't make it. I
No.
would, you know what I mean? Like I would just add maybe some shoulder pads or something, because that's basically all we do anyway with stuff. We usually dress up an existing model and add some things here and there, but we don't go overboard with like putting all kinds of stuff on it.
Right.
So,
okay.
You know, unless you so desire, but I would I would spend my time more on you know,
on actual storytelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay, deal.
Whatever, but you know, if it whatever floats your boat, but I would say do that. You know, that would be my suggestion. So,
okay.
All right, anybody else? All right, so everybody has the email that I sent with the character stuff, right? That I want to make sure, because if you don't, I'll send it again. So now's the time to tell me if you didn't get that email with Athena and dock workers and.
You mentioned the warehouse, that you resent the warehouse.
I did. I put it in there. I didn't send the link yet to you guys. So
okay, it's just
I sent it actually. Rebecca. I don't know if she's here tonight. Sometimes she's in, sometimes she's not. But she was the one who pointed it out to me, and I thought I dropped it in there. I could have sworn I did, but I didn't. Actually, the one thing that I will tell you though, the Rogaine. It's called Rogaine City. I always think of the hair replacement.
Yeah, I was like...
but I don't know why they called it. It's called Rogaine. Actually, I've called it Rogaine. It's called Rogaine City. We call it a joke because we had it years ago at Marvel. We called it Rogaine City, and a bunch of bald guys walking around. But but it's a SketchUp file. That file has so much cool. Like it's such a great background. It's such a great setting. That you could probably find some part of that Rogaine City that would have, you know, and I'm sure your cat can help you find that too.
Oh my God. He wants to. It's like,
yeah, he's like, I want to go. He's ready to go, man. He's like, I'm all set. But I'll send you guys the link. I'll send you the link. As a matter of fact, as we're talking right now. So let me see here. So I am going to forward the email that I sent right now. So
I think I saw the Rogaine.
Yeah, that's there. I know that one's there. So you know, feel free to play around with it. Like that is all right. So I just sent you, because she had questions about bolos. She didn't know what a bolo was. And actually when you pull it up, it does look like a knife. There was but the bolo, that's not what it is. The bolos are like the things with the balls on them, and you throw them, and they use them like to wrap around people's feet. So anyway, the email that I sent has a actual bolo, and then it has a guy on a horse about to attack a poor goose with a bolo. But you'll get the idea when you see it. So it's there. All right. Okay. So everybody have a good week and get going, get cracking, because we've got a lot of work to do. So action is work. So let's get going on it and kick ass. Brandon asked, he just sent me a thing on Facebook. He said, I hope the class liked me. I was like, I'm sure they did. So he's a good guy. It was nice of him to. I don't think we're going to have any more special guests because we just have too much to do. And I don't want to take up time with people talking when we should be focusing on this stuff. So anyway, I'll see you next week. If you have any questions, send me stuff, you know. So and you can always go on Discord. You can always put stuff. If you really want to do a pitch where you have people's opinions about stuff that way, throw some of it up on Discord, and then that way you can all take a look and see what each other's doing there, and do some of that work before we get into class next week. you know, if you so desire. That might be the better thing to do. That's the reason why I made the Discord, because I figure some of this is going to extend past the class time. So, you know, I want to focus on what's most important, and the Discord stuff can be used for things like, hey, like, you know, I want to have Wonder Woman do this. What do you guys think? You know, and it's like, oh yeah, like that would be cool if you had Wonder Woman, you know, do this or whatever. So, and then when we get in here, we can talk about how to have Wonder Woman do that stuff. That's what I'd rather spend the time on. All right.
Hey.
All right. Have a wonderful week, you guys. So it's always a pleasure having everybody in doing this stuff. So, so let's make some kick-ass action boards.
All right.
All right. Good night, everyone. Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.